Hello guys, welcome to Phoenix What If. So in this video, we will see, what if Godlike Naruto was transported to Overlord and fell in love with Albedo? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Golden God of Nazarick. The end was not an end. It was a tear in the fabric of everything. One moment, Naruto Uzumaki was a sun, a blazing confluence of chakra so dense it bent the world around him. He was clashing with Kagaya Otsutsuki, a being who unmade and remade reality with a thought, their final blows meeting in a cataclysm that should have annihilated a dimension. There was a sound that was not a sound, a light that was pure, star-devouring black, and then, silence. A profound, unnerving stillness that seeped into his bones. He opened his eyes. The golden fire of his six paths sage mode still clung to him like a second skin, casting a warm, divine light in the cavernous chamber. He was standing, floating an inch off the polished obsidian floor, the 9 black truth-seeking orbs hovering in a placid halo behind his back. The air was cold, stale, and heavy with an energy that felt utterly alien. It was not chakra. It was not the vibrant life force of the world he knew. It was something else, something stagnant, yet potent, like the lingering magic of a forgotten ritual. He was in a throne room. The scale of it was absurd, a place built for giants or gods. Banners emblazoned with a sigil he didn't recognize hung from impossibly high ceilings, lost in the oppressive gloom far above. At the far end of the hall, a grand staircase led to an ornate, almost monstrous throne, and upon it sat a figure that radiated an aura of profound death. It was a skeleton, yet it wore opulent robes of regal purple and black. A pulsating dark red orb floated within its ribcage, a malevolent heart of pure dread. But it was not the lich that held his immediate attention. It was the assembly before it. Lined up on either side of the crimson carpet that unfurled towards him were beings that looked like they had clawed their way out of a nightmare. A towering insectoid warrior, its chitinous armor gleaming, exhaled clouds of frost. A slender, dark-skinned elf with a predatory grin, clutching a twisted staff. A beautiful woman in a pristine white dress, whose smile was a fraction too wide, her eyes holding a chilling emptiness. And standing directly before the throne, a figure in magnificent, spiky black armor. A battle axe held loosely in one gauntleted hand. She had horns curving gracefully from her temples and midnight black wings folded at her back. A succubus of impossible beauty and even more impossible power. Her name was Albedo, and as the golden light of Naruto's arrival flooded the throne room of the great tomb of Nazarick, her world, which had only just begun, tilted on its axis. Intruder. Her voice was not a shout but a resonant command, sharp and clear as shattered glass. It echoed in the vast hall, a declaration of war. In a movement so swift it was a blur even to her fellow guardians. She vanished from her position and reappeared directly between the skeletal being on the throne and the golden intruder. Her demonic wings flared, a shield of black feathers and righteous fury. The battle axe, the world item Ginungagap, was now held in a two-handed grip, its dark head humming with destructive power. "You will not take another step," she declared, her voice laced with venomous promise. Her emerald eyes, flecked with gold, burned with a loyalty so absolute it was terrifying. Naruto's gaze met hers. He took in the horns, the wings, the sheer killing intent rolling off her in waves. It was potent, stronger than any Jonin he had ever faced, but it was like a candle flame trying to intimidate the sun. He felt no threat from her. He felt nothing at all. He lowered himself, the soles of his sandals touching the cold floor with a soft, soundless touch. The golden aura around him did not diminish. "Where am I?" His voice was calm, devoid of malice or fear. It was a simple question. But in this place, directed at these beings, it was an act of supreme audacity. On the throne, Momonga, the Overlord Ain's Ul Gown, was fighting a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated panic. One moment he was reveling in the first true moments of his new reality, his NPCs alive and sentient, and the next, a god had appeared in the heart of his fortress. His emotional suppression skill kicked in, dousing the terror with a wave of forced calm, but the underlying dread remained. His senses, enhanced by his new form, screamed at him. The Golden Man was not a player. He was not an NPC. He was something other. The ambient light he gave off was not an illusion. It was raw, unquantifiable power that made the divine class items he wore feel like cheap trinkets. He tried to appraise him. A dozen analysis spells, from the lowest tier to the highest, fizzled out before they even reached the man. It was like trying to measure the ocean with a teaspoon. Data unknown. Level unknown. HP per megapixel unknown. Every metric returned an error, a rejection of Nazarik's fundamental laws. Hold, Albedo. Ains's voice was a regal baritone, a mask of unshakable authority. He was desperately trying to believe in himself. Albedo's head snapped back, her expression one of disbelief. My lord, this thing, it appeared from nowhere. It is an unknown threat of the highest magnitude. Allow me to eliminate it. I said, hold. The command was sharper this time, infused with the passive aura of a ruler. It brooked no argument. Albedo flinched as if struck. Her grip on her axe tightened, her knuckles white. But she bowed her head in submission. As you command, Lord Ains. She did not lower her weapon, however, her body remaining a tense line of defiance, a living wall between her master and the unknown. Naruto watched the exchange, his head tilted slightly. The skeleton was their leader. The devotion the winged woman showed him was absolute. It reminded him of his own bond with his teammates, with his village. It was a feeling he understood. I'm not looking for a fight, Naruto said, his gaze sweeping over the other guardians. The insectoid warrior, Cocytus, gripped his halberd, his mandibles clicking in appraisal. He recognized power when he saw it, and this was beyond any scale he comprehended. Demiurge, the archdevil, had a thin, calculating smile on his face. His mind was racing, formulating 100 different scenarios, 100 different ways to dissect, analyze, and, if necessary, destroy this anomaly. Shultir Bloodfallen, the vampire, was looking at Naruto with an expression of predatory hunger, a flush on her pale cheeks. Such power was intoxicating. Then state your name and your purpose for invading the great tomb of Nazarik, Ains commanded. His voice echoing with manufactured confidence. He leaned forward on his throne, the red light in his eye sockets flaring. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. He paused, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features. As for my purpose, I don't have one. I was in a battle. A very big one. And then I was here. He looked around the throne room again, truly seeing the oppressive, decadent gloom. This place is called Nazarik. Demiurge stepped forward, his smile widening. Indeed, the final bastion of the supreme beings, the glorious creation of the gods. A place you have entered uninvited. His words were silken, but they carried a threat as sharp as any blade. Naruto's gaze settled on him. He could feel the duplicity and cunning radiating from the archdevil. Supreme beings, gods. He gave a small, humorless laugh. I've had my fill of self-proclaimed gods for one lifetime. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Cocytus's frosty breath became a visible plume. Albedo's wings bristled, her killing intent spiking so sharply it was a physical force. To insult the creators, the 41 supreme beings, was the ultimate blasphemy. It was a crime punishable by an eternity of torment in Demiurge's happy farm. You dare, Albedo hissed, her voice a low growl. Before she could move, one of the truth-seeking orbs behind Naruto detached itself from the halo and zipped forward. It didn't move with incredible speed, but with an unnerving sense of inevitability. It stopped a mere inch from Albedo's face. It was a sphere of perfect blackness, an orb of absolute nothing that seemed to drink the light from the room. Albedo froze, her instincts, honed by her creator, Tabula Smaragdina, screaming at her. That small black ball was not just an object, it was the concept of annihilation given form. To touch it would not be to die. It would be to cease to have ever existed. Naruto didn't even look at her. His eyes were still on Demiurge. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm just telling you my experience. He sighed, the golden aura around him softening for a moment. Look, I don't know who you people are, or what this place is. My world is gone. I can't feel it. I can't feel anyone. For the first time, a deep, profound sense of loss washed over his face. The bravado, the godlike power, receded for an instant, revealing a young man utterly and terrifyingly alone. That flicker of vulnerability did more to disarm Albedo than any threat. Her rage was momentarily supplanted by a strange, jarring emotion she couldn't identify. This man, this being of incomprehensible power, looked lost. Her programming warred with a nascent curiosity. A god should not look so human. Ains saw it too. It was a potential weakness, an angle to be exploited. But it also made the man seem less like a monster and more like a person. A person who could obliterate them all without trying. Ains made a decision. Brute force was out of the question. Intimidation was laughable. That left diplomacy and information gathering. You claim to be from another world, Ains stated, his tone shifting from confrontational to inquisitive. An extraordinary claim. I would ask for proof of your power. Not in aggression, but as a demonstration. So that we may understand what we are dealing with. It was a gamble. Asking a potential god to show off could be seen as a challenge. Naruto turned his full attention back to the skeletal overlord. The request was reasonable. He needed to understand his own abilities in this strange new place as much as they did. The energy here felt different, sluggish. He needed to know if he was still himself. All right. He held up his right hand, palm open. Chakra, vibrant and blue, began to swirl in his palm. The guardians watched, their senses on high alert. They felt the energy coalescing. A force utterly unlike the tiered magic they understood. It was wilder, more fundamental. Then, with a sound like 1,000 shrieking birds, 4 windmill-like blades of pure energy erupted from the sphere. The Recentrican. It wasn't the colossal version he'd used in the war. It was a small, controlled thing, fitting neatly in his hand. But the power contained within it was astronomical. The very air in the throne room began to shred around it. The pressure was immense, a physical weight that made the level 100 floor guardians feel like they were at the bottom of the ocean. Albedo's armor creaked. Cocytus instinctively took a defensive stance. Demiurge's smile finally vanished, replaced by a mask of pure, analytical shock. This was not magic. Magic had rules, tiers, equivalents. This was chaos. The raw, untamed power of creation and destruction held in a man's hand. This is a wind-style jutsu, Naruto explained calmly, as if he were teaching a class. It attacks on a cellular level, severing every nerve channel with microscopic blades of wind. It's messy. He didn't throw it. He didn't need to. He simply let it dissipate. The shrieking sound vanished, and the oppressive pressure lifted. Silence, thick and heavy, returned to the throne room. Ains was utterly, completely speechless. His emotional suppressor was working overtime, preventing him from screaming. That small spinning ball of energy, he had no doubt it could have leveled the entire tomb of Nazarick, a fortress that was supposed to be impregnable. A world-class item might have defended against it, but he wasn't certain, and the man had called it a simple jutsu. I see, Ains said, his voice a dry rasp. He felt like a man who had brought a gun to a fight, only to fight. His opponent was piloting a star destroyer. Your power is confirmed. Naruto then looked up, towards the impossibly high, dark ceiling of the throne room. He raised his other hand. And this, a small orb of light appeared in his palm. It grew steadily, not with the chaotic energy of the Recentrican, but with a pure, gentle, and overwhelmingly powerful light. It was the light of a star, born in his hand. The oppressive gloom of the throne room was banished, washed away by a golden radiance that felt warm, vital, and holy. It was a light that did not burn, but nourished. The undead members of the assembly, Shultir and Ains himself, felt a deep, instinctual revulsion to it, a searing pain that was not physical but spiritual. It was the antithesis of their very being. Yet, they could not look away. It was the most beautiful and most terrifying thing they had ever seen. Albedo stared, mesmerized. The light, it felt like the divine presence of the supreme beings she was programmed to worship. But amplified 1,000-fold. This was not the borrowed light of a holy spell. This was the source. This was a man holding a sun in his hand. He closed his hand, and the light vanished, plunging the hall back into its familiar, oppressive darkness. The contrast was so stark it was disorienting. I can give life, Naruto said, his voice soft, and I can take it away. I'd rather not do the second one here. So, can we just talk? The balance of power had not just shifted. It had been annihilated. There was no balance. There was Naruto Uzumaki, and there was everyone else. Ains leaned back in his throne, the red lights in his eyes dimming as he processed the new reality. He was Ains Ul Gaon, the master of Nazarick, the last of the supreme beings. He was a figure of ultimate power. And he was completely and utterly outclassed. Ains was a master of a game, a high-level player with ultimate gear. Naruto was the game developer who had just walked onto the server with admin privileges. But a guild leader, a ruler, could not show weakness. He had to adapt. He had to think. This being, Naruto, was not hostile. He was lost. He was an asset of immeasurable value, or a threat of apocalyptic scale. Keeping him close was the only logical move. Naruto Uzumaki, Ains began, his voice regaining its regal composure. Your demonstration was enlightening. It is clear you are no mere traveler. You are a being of immense power, adrift in a world you do not know. The great tomb of Nazarick is a sanctuary for the powerful. We are not your enemies. Demiurge's eyes widened slightly. He saw where his master was going. A brilliant, calculated risk. I offer you a place here, Ains continued. Not as a prisoner, but as an honored guest. We will offer you our hospitality, provide you with any information we can about this world. In return, all we ask is your cooperation and that you treat our home with respect. Stay with us, until you can find your bearings. The guardians were stunned into silence. Their lord was offering shelter to the intruder, the being who had insulted their creators. Albedo was the most shocked of all. Her mind raced. It was a strategic move, of course. Lord Ains was wise beyond measure. Keep the god under your roof where you can watch him. Learn his weaknesses. It was the only logical play. And yet, a part of her felt a strange sense of relief. The thought of fighting him, of trying to destroy that golden light, felt wrong. It felt like sacrilege. Naruto considered the offer. He was alone. He knew nothing of this world, or if it was even a LD at all and not some strange afterlife. These creatures were powerful, organized, and clearly had a home base. The skeleton seemed intelligent, a strategist rather than a mindless destroyer. It was the best offer he was likely to get. All right, Naruto said, the last of his golden aura receding into his body, leaving him looking like a normal, if unusually vibrant, young man in a tattered black and orange jumpsuit. The truth-seeking orbs dissolved into nothingness. The sudden shift from divine being to mortal form was jarring. I accept your offer. For now. Ains felt a wave of relief so powerful it would have made him collapse if he had a body capable of it. He had averted immediate annihilation. Excellent. We welcome you, Naruto Uzumaki. He then turned his gaze to the still tense succubus. Albedo. Yes, Lord Ains. She snapped to attention. As the overseer of the floor guardians, you will be personally responsible for our guest. You will be his guide and liaison. See to his every need. Answer his questions. And ensure he is comfortable. The unspoken part of the command was clear to everyone. You will be his warden. Do not let him out of your sight. Albedo's mind went blank for a second. She, charged with watching this golden god. It was a task of unimaginable importance. A test of her loyalty and her ability. It will be my utmost honor, my lord, she declared, bowing deeply. Good. Ains waved a skeletal hand. Take him to one of the vacant suites in the royal wing. Show him the hospitality of Nazarick. Albedo straightened up, her expression a complex mask of duty and trepidation. She turned to face Naruto, who was watching her with an unreadable expression. For the first time, she was not looking at him as an enemy to be destroyed, but as a charge to be managed. He was shorter than she had realized without his aura and floating, though still tall for a human. His hair was the color of sunshine, his eyes a startling, piercing blue, and he had strange whisker-like marks on his cheeks. He looked young, far too young to wield the power of a creator god. This way, Lord Uzumaki, she said, the honorific feeling strange and clumsy on her tongue. Naruto gave a small, weary smile. Just Naruto is fine. She simply nodded, her professionalism a shield for her turmoil. She turned and began to walk, her armor making almost no sound on the polished floor. Naruto fell into step beside her. As they walked past the other guardians, he could feel their eyes on him. The insectoid warrior's gaze was one of pure, warrior's respect. The dark elf's was one of cunning evaluation. The vampires was hungry. But he paid them no mind. His attention was on the woman walking beside him. She walked with a rigid posture, her back ramrod straight, her wings held tight. He could sense the conflict within her. The absolute loyalty to her master warring with the overwhelming awe and fear she felt towards him. He was an anomaly she couldn't categorize, a problem she couldn't solve with her axe. They left the throne room, the massive doors closing behind them with a deep, echoing boom, sealing them in the silent, opulent hallways of the 9th floor. The corridors were lit by magical lanterns that cast a cold, sterile light. It was a place of immense wealth and power, but it felt lifeless. It felt like a tomb. They walked in silence for a long time, the only sound the faint rustle of Albedo's dress beneath her armor. Naruto, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, let his senses expand. He could feel the sheer magical energy saturating the very stone of the fortress. He could sense the thousands of beings that inhabited this place, golems, demons, undead of every shape and size. It was an army, a nation hidden beneath the earth. Your boss, Naruto said, breaking the silence. Ains, was it? He's an undead, but he's not evil. Not entirely. Albedo stopped walking, turning to him with a flash of anger in her eyes. Lord Ains is justice. He is wisdom. He is the pinnacle of the supreme beings who created us all. You would not be breathing if not for his infinite mercy. I wasn't insulting him, Naruto replied calmly, unfazed by her outburst. I can sense things, emotions, intentions. Underneath all that death and power, he's careful, and maybe a little scared. Albedo was about to issue another fiery retort, but the words died in her throat. Scared, Lord Ains. The idea was preposterous. It was blasphemy. But, the way he had handled Naruto's arrival, it was not with the arrogance of an all-powerful god, but with the careful cunning of a master strategist who knew he was outmatched. Was that caution, or was it fear? Her loyalty rejected the notion, but a tiny, traitorous part of her mind admitted the truth of his words. She did not reply. She simply turned and continued walking. They soon arrived at a set of grand, ornate doors. Albedo pushed them open, revealing a suite of rooms so luxurious it would have been fit for an emperor. A massive bedroom with a canopy bed, a sitting area with plush furniture, and a balcony that overlooked a vast, subterranean cavern filled with glowing crystals. This will be your residence, she stated formally. Anything you require, you need only ask. Food, drink, entertainment, although I am not sure what sustenance a being like you requires. Naruto walked into the room, looking around. It was grand, but it felt as cold and empty as the hallway. I just need a place to think. He walked over to the balcony, looking out at the artificial starlight of the cavern below. He was so far from home. So alone. The weight of his reality finally began to crush him. Albedo watched him. She saw the slump in his shoulders, the weariness in his stance. The god was gone again, replaced by the lost young man. It was this duality that she found so dangerously fascinating. He was a being who could unmake her world with a stray thought, yet he looked like he carried the weight of 1,000 sorrows. Why did you spare us? She asked, the question escaping her before she could stop it. In the throne room, you could have killed us all. Why didn't you? Naruto turned back from the balcony, his blue eyes meeting hers. A faint golden light was beginning to emanate from him again, not an aura of power, but a soft, warm glow that seemed to be his natural state. It made the cold light of the magical lanterns feel dim and lifeless. Because that's not who I am, he said simply. I don't kill people unless I have to. And you were just protecting your home. Protecting your leader. I can't fault you for that. That's something I'd die for, too. His words struck a chord deep within her. It was the core of her entire being. Loyalty, protection, devotion to her creator. He understood it. This outsider, this god, this man. He understood the most fundamental part of her. She found herself unable to speak. Her mind, which was usually a sharp, orderly place filled with devotion to Ains and disdain for all lesser beings, was a chaotic mess of conflicting thoughts and feelings. Fear, respect, awe, and a strange, unfamiliar warmth that was spreading through her chest. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. Get some rest, Albedo, Naruto said, his voice gentle. He could sense her inner turmoil. You look like you've had a long day. She stiffened, her formal mask snapping back into place. I am the overseer of the Guardians. I do not require rest. I will be stationed outside your door should you require anything. Before he could argue, she turned on her heel and marched out of the room. The doors closing firmly behind her. Naruto sighed and walked over to the enormous bed, sitting on the edge. The silence of the tomb pressed in on him. He was a prisoner, albeit a gilded one. A guest of a skeleton king in his monstrous court. He was in another dimension, a world without chakra, a world where he was a true anomaly. But he was alive, and he was not entirely alone. The winged woman, Albedo, there was something about her. A fire, a fierce, unbending will that he couldn't help but admire. He lay back on the bed, the silk sheets cool against his skin, and stared up at the stone ceiling. For the first time since he had arrived, he allowed himself a small, genuine smile. This was going to be interesting. Outside the door, Albedo stood as still as a statue, her hand resting on the pommel of her axe. She was supposed to be guarding a prisoner, observing a threat. But as she stood there, she could feel it. A faint, golden warmth seeping through the thick, magic-infused door. It was the light of the sun, held captive in the heart of the deepest darkness. And it did not feel threatening. It felt like hope. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Weight of a Soul. Albedo did not move for 8 hours. She stood before the gilded doors of the guest suite, a statue of obsidian and ivory, her hand never straying from the pommel of her world item axe. Her senses, honed to a supernatural degree, were focused on the room beyond. She did not listen for sounds of escape or plots of destruction. She listened to the silence. It was a silence unlike any other in the great tomb of Nazarick. The very air in this place was saturated with negative energy, auras of dread, and the cold, sterile hum of powerful magic. It was the air she had been born into, the only thing she had ever known. But from beyond that door, a different energy seeped into the corridor. It was a gentle, persistent warmth, a positive pressure that pushed back against the tomb's inherent gloom. It felt like standing next to a hearth on a winter night. It felt alive. Her mind, a fortress of logic, loyalty, and programmed devotion, was in turmoil. The intruder, Naruto Uzumaki, was a paradox that defied every parameter she possessed. His power was absolute, a casual display that had made a mockery of the combined strength of the floor guardians. By all rights, he should be arrogant, demanding, a tyrant in the mold of the gods of myth. Yet, he was not. He had spoken to her with a strange gentleness, looked at her with an understanding that was more unsettling than any threat. He had understood her duty. He had seen her loyalty not as a function of her programming but as a virtue he himself shared. No one had ever looked at her like that. To the other denizens of Nazarick, she was the overseer, an object of fear, respect, and authority. To the supreme beings, her creators, she was a creation, a tool of immense power and beauty, but a tool nonetheless. This golden god had looked at her and seen a person. The thought was so alien it made her wings ache. She replayed his words again and again. You were just protecting your home. Protecting your leader. I can't fault you for that. That's something I'd die for, too. It was a simple statement, yet it had forged a connection she was unequipped to handle. It implied an equality of spirit, a shared value that transcended their origins. It was dangerous. It was seductive. Her devotion to Lord Ains was the sun at the center of her universe. But this new feeling, it was like the sudden appearance of a second, warmer sun in the sky, threatening to throw her entire world out of orbit. Inside the suite, Naruto was not asleep. He lay on the impossibly soft bed, his hands behind his head, staring into the darkness. He had extended his senses the moment Albedo had closed the door, not to spy, but to feel. He felt her standing guard, a pillar of conflicted, powerful energy. He felt the thousands of other beings in this massive fortress, their natures ranging from mindless constructs to intelligent, malevolent entities. He felt the colossal structure around him, a place of immense power and deep, lonely history. And then he reached further. He let his senses, honed by a lifetime of war and a connection to the very life force of his planet, expand beyond the tomb. He searched for the familiar warmth of the land of fire, for the bustling, chaotic energy of Konoha, for the bright, familiar signatures of Sakura, Kakashi, Hinata. He searched for the raging, grumpy, yet comforting presence of Kurama within him. There was nothing. An abyss. A void where everything he had ever known and loved should have been. The connection was severed. He was not just in a different place, he was in a different existence, a reality where. The very concept of chakra did not seem to exist beyond what his own body could produce. The weight of it, the true, final, crushing weight of it, settled upon him. He was the last, the sole survivo, of a world that might as well have never been. A single tear traced a path from the corner of his eye, across his temple, and into his sun-kissed hair. It was not a tear of sadness, but of profound, ultimate loneliness. He was a god, yes. But a god of a dead faith, the lone inhabitant of a forgotten heaven. He lay there until the artificial lights of the cavern below dimmed, and then brightened again. Simulating a dawn he would never see again. The doors to his suite opened without a sound. Albedo entered, no longer in her imposing black armor but in her pristine white dress. The horns and wings remained, a startling contrast to the domesticity of the scene. Behind her, a half-dozen homunculus maids, perfectly uniform in their starched outfits, pushed carts laden with silver platters. "Good morning, Lord Uzumaki," Albedo said, her voice a model of formal courtesy. "We were not aware of your dietary needs, so the chefs have prepared a wide selection of dishes. Please, let us know what is to your liking." Naruto sat up, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. The brief moment of grief was gone, locked away behind a calm, watchful expression. He looked at the feast being laid on the grand dining table. Roasted meats, exotic fruits he didn't recognize, steaming breads, and jewel-toned liquids in crystal decanters. It was enough food to feed a small army. "This is a lot," he said, a faint smile on his face. He stood up, stretching. "Honestly, I'd be happy with a bowl of ramen." The maids froze, their movements stuttering. Albedo's perfectly sculpted eyebrow twitched. "Men," she repeated, the foreign word sounding awkward. "Noodles. In a broth. Never mind." He waved it off. He could tell he was disrupting their carefully ordered world. "This is fine. Thank you." He walked to the table, and the maids scurried to pull out a chair for him. He sat, feeling a bit foolish at being waited on so attentively. He picked up a piece of fruit and took a bite. It was sweet, tangy, and utterly delicious. "You can all go," he said to the maids, his voice gentle but firm. "I can feed myself." The maids looked in panic towards Albedo, their eyes wide. To be dismissed was a sign of failure, of displeasing a guest of the Supreme One. "Her Grace, the Overseer, has ordered us to attend to you," one of the maids said, her voice trembling slightly. Albedo stepped forward. "Their purpose is to serve. To deny them that is to deny the will of the supreme beings who created them for this task. It would bring them great distress." Naruto looked from the terrified maid to the stern expression on Albedo's face. He was in their world now, and he had to play by their rules. "I understand. My apologies." He nodded to the maids, who looked visibly relieved. He continued to eat, while Albedo stood by the wall, observing his every move. It was like eating breakfast under the gaze of a beautiful, heavily armed hawk. "You don't have to stand there like a statue, you know," he said between bites. "You can sit, or at least stop staring at me like I'm going to vaporize the silverware." A faint, almost imperceptible blush touched Albedo's cheeks. "My duty, as assigned by Lord Ains, is to observe you. And you're doing a great job," he said, his tone light and teasing. "A+ for observation. But you can observe from a chair. Or are all the chairs in Nazarick reserved for skeletons and guests?" His casual humor was another weapon she was unprepared for. It chipped away at her formal defenses. After a moment's hesitation, she glided to the table and took a seat opposite him. Her posture still ramrod straight. It felt like a shocking breach of protocol, but he was a guest of Ains's, and his requests, however strange, had to be considered. "You said this place was created by supreme beings," Naruto said, changing the subject. "Are they your parents?" "They are our creators. Our gods," Albedo corrected, her voice filled with reverence. 41 of them, who built this world and all of us within it. Lord Ains is the last of them who remains with us. The last." Naruto's eyes met hers. "So you know what it's like to be the only one left." The teasing lightness was gone, replaced by that same profound melancholy she had seen in him the night before. The question hit her with the force of a physical blow. The departure of the other 40 supreme beings was the great sorrow of Nazarick. A wound that had never healed. She had never considered that this powerful outsider could share that same pain. "We hold their memory in our hearts," she said, her voice softer than she intended. "We exist to preserve their legacy and to serve the one who stayed." "A worthy cause," Naruto acknowledged, his gaze drifting towards the balcony. "A home is worth protecting, even if it's a little gloomy." He stood up, finishing his meal. "You know, for an honored guest, I haven't seen much of the accommodations. How about a tour?" Albedo was momentarily taken aback. Then she remembered her orders. Keep him occupied, keep him observed. A tour was the perfect solution. "A splendid idea. The great tomb of Nazarick is a treasure worthy of display. I would be Hano, read to show you the splendor of the Supreme Being's creation." "Great. Just, maybe not the super spooky parts first. I just ate." Her lips pursed, fighting back a smile she didn't understand. This man was impossible. He spoke of gods and loneliness one moment and made jokes about their sacred home the next. She led him out of the suite, deciding to confine the tour to the upper, more civilized floors for now. The first 2 floors were tombs and catacombs, hardly suitable for a guest of his stature. They walked the silent, immaculate hallways of the 9th floor, past priceless works of art and statues of demonic beings, each one radiating a powerful magical aura. "Your home is very clean," Naruto commented, running a hand along a marble railing. "In my village, there was always dust everywhere. Leaves blowing in the streets. Kids tracking mud into buildings. It was messy. Alive. Nazarick is perfect, as its creators intended," Albedo stated, a hint of pride in her voice. "There is no need for such chaos." "Chaos can be good," Naruto countered. "It means things are happening. People are living." He looked at her. "Do people here live? Or do you just exist?" The question was pointed, and she had no easy answer. "They served. They obeyed. They waited for the commands of their master." Was that living? "Our existence has purpose. It is the highest calling." As they approached a large, ornate doorway, it swung open. And 2 figures emerged. They were dark elves, twins, a boy and a girl. The girl, dressed in a green tunic, had an energetic, almost feral look in her eyes, her blonde hair tied back in a ponytail. The boy, in similar but blue attire, was her opposite, shy, nervous, and clutching a wooden staff. They both froze upon seeing Albedo, and then their eyes widened in unison as they saw the golden-haired man beside her. "Overseer Albedo," the girl chirped, bowing low. The boy stammered a greeting and bowed as well. "Ora, Mare," Albedo said, her tone formal but not unkind. "What are you doing away from the 6th floor?" "Lord Ains summoned us," Ora said, her eyes, one blue and one green, sparkling with excitement. Then her gaze fixed on Naruto, full of undisguised, predatory curiosity. "And who's this? He doesn't smell like one of ours." "This is Naruto Uzumaki, an honored guest of Lord Ains," Albedo explained, her voice carrying a clear warning. Ora's grin widened. "A guest? Wow, he's pretty. Is he strong?" She took a step closer, circling Naruto like a curious wolf. Mare, meanwhile, tried to hide behind his sister, peeking out at Naruto with an expression of pure terror and fascination. Naruto simply smiled at them. His senses had told him they weren't human, despite their appearance. They were powerful, far more so than any child should be. "Nice to meet you both. I'm Naruto." He knelt down to their level, an act that shocked Albedo. A god did not lower himself. Ora's bravado faltered for a second at the friendly gesture. "I'm Ora, and this is my useless brother, Mare." I'm not useless," Mare stuttered, blushing fiercely. "You're the guardians of the 6th floor, right?" Naruto asked, his smile never wavering. He could feel the raw nature energy clinging to them. A familiar and welcome sensation in this sterile place. "That must be a big job for you too." His genuine warmth seemed to short-circuit their usual responses. They are used to being treated as either powerful weapons or children, but he spoke to them as capable individuals. It's the best floor," Ora boasted. "I have all my beasts there." You should come see them. I bet they'd like you. Naruto chuckled. I'd like that. He then looked at Mare. It's okay, he said softly. You don't have to be scared. As he spoke, his hand began to glow with a soft, green light. It was not chakra, but the pure life energy of Sage Mode, channeled into a gentle, healing aura. He held it out, and a tiny, perfect flower bloomed from his palm, a vibrant orange lily. He offered it to Mare. The young dark elf stared, his eyes wide with wonder. He hesitantly reached out and took the flower. It felt warm, alive, pulsing with a gentle energy that was the complete opposite of the death that permeated Nazarick. He looked from the flower to Naruto's kind eyes and felt his fear melting away, replaced by a sense of awe that rivaled his feelings for the supreme beings. Albedo watched the entire exchange, her heart pounding in her chest. The casual creation of life. The easy way he had disarmed two of the most powerful, and socially awkward, floor guardians. He radiated charisma that was not manufactured or based on authority, but was utterly, terrifyingly natural. He was drawing her comrades to him without even trying. As Naruto stood up, his senses suddenly sharpened. For a fleeting second, he felt something else, a flicker of energy from deep below them, many floors down. It was a dissonant, corrupted note in the symphony of Nazarick's magic. It was ancient, malevolent, and felt trapped. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, a ghost of a sensation. What is it? Albedo asked, noticing the subtle shift in his expression. Nothing, he said, his eyes narrowing slightly. Just a draft. He knew it wasn't a draft. But he also knew that now was not the time to ask. He turned his attention back to Albedo, his expression becoming more serious. They had walked and talked, and he had seen the surface of this place. Now he wanted to see what lay beneath. Albedo, he said, his voice dropping the playful tone. I'm not a fool. I know I'm your prisoner as much as I am your guest. Ains is trying to figure out what I am, what I can do, and whether I'm a threat or a tool he can use. Albedo stiffened, her face becoming an impassive mask. Lord Ains is gracious. You mistake his caution for manipulation. Maybe, Naruto conceded, but I want to know what you think. Not the overseer of the floor guardians. Not the loyal servant of the last supreme being. You, the woman with the horns and the axe. When you look at me, what do you see? A threat, a monster, a curiosity. They had stopped in a grand, circular chamber, the ceiling of which was an NTED starscape that mimicked the night sky. The soft, silver light cast long shadows on the floor. His question hung in the air between them, sharp and unavoidable. It was the most direct and personal question anyone had ever asked her. Her programming screamed at her to give the party line. You are an unknown variable, a potential threat to Nazarick that must be monitored at all times. Her loyalty. Why to Ains demanded she say nothing that could compromise his authority. But her own burgeoning feelings, the strange warmth he ignited in her, the respect he had shown for her, for the twins, for her entire reason for being, they warred with her core directives. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked into his eyes, blue as the deepest sea, and felt like she was the one being analyzed, being seen through completely. She saw no judgment in his gaze, only a patient, genuine curiosity. He actually wanted to know. She began, and then stopped. She could not lie to him. She did not know why. But the thought of doing so felt like a betrayal of something important. But she could not speak the truth, either. The truth was a chaotic storm of fear, fascination, and a terrifying sense of kinship. I do not know, she finally whispered, the admission costing her a great deal of pride. When I look at you, I do not know what I see. Naruto held her gaze for a long moment, then gave a small, understanding nod. Honest, I like that. He turned and looked up at the artificial stars. Well, you've got plenty of time to figure it out. Because I don't think I'm going anywhere. Albedo watched him, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. He was right. He wasn't going anywhere. He was here, in the heart of their fortress, a golden god in a gilded cage. And she, his warden, was beginning to feel more like the one who was truly trapped. Later, she stood before the throne of Ains Ul Gaon, the other guardians absent. Report, Ains commanded, the red light in his eye sockets fixed on her. What is your assessment of our guest? He is compliant, my lord, Albedo said, choosing her words with extreme care. He shows no signs of hostility. He is inquisitive about Nazarick and our customs. He interacted with Aura and Mare, and pacified them with ease. I see, Ains mused. The report from the twins had been effusive. They had been utterly charmed. It was a worrying development. You sound troubled, Albedo. Give me your personal opinion. Do you believe he is a threat? Albedo took a deep breath, the memory of Naruto's piercing gaze still fresh in her mind. Yes, my lord, she said, her voice firm. He is the greatest threat we have ever faced. Ains leaned forward, the aura of death around him intensifying. Explain. He is dangerous, Albedo stated, her emerald eyes burning with a strange new fire. Not because he is hostile, my lord. But because I am afraid that he is not. The statement hung in the silent throne room, a chilling prophecy that the Overlord of death could not fully comprehend. The greatest threat to his world of monsters and absolute loyalty was not a conquering king or a rival god. It was a hero's kindness. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. Echoes in the Dark. The summons came not as a request, but as a regal command that echoed through the magical network of the Great Tomb. Naruto was standing on his balcony, watching the slow, majestic icy drift of the glowing crystals in the cavern below, when the voice of Ains Ulgown manifested in the air around him. It was a disembodied, resonant baritone, a spell of communication that carried the weight of absolute authority. He was to present himself in the throne room. Albedo was already waiting for him outside his door, her expression as unreadable as the polished obsidian of her armor, which she had donned once more. The message was clear. This was not a social call. As they made the long walk back to the heart of the 9th floor, the silence between them was different than before. It was no longer just the awkward quiet of a warden in her charge. It was heavy with unspoken questions, with the weight of Albedo's final, chilling words to her master. He is dangerous because I am afraid he is not. She walked with a purpose that felt sharper, more focused, as if she were escorting not just a guest, but a living concept that threatened the very foundations of her world. Naruto, for his part, walked with a placid calm, his hands tucked into the pockets of his jumpsuit. He knew this was a test. The hospitality was over. Now, the questions would begin, and they would not be asked with words alone. The throne room was as vast and imposing as he remembered. Ains sat upon his throne, the pulsating red orb in his chest casting a bloody light on the crimson carpet. This time, however, the other floor guardians were not present. It was just the three of them in the cavernous hall, a fact that made the confrontation feel both more intimate and infinitely more serious. Naruto Uzumaki, Ains began, his voice echoing in the stillness. You have been our guest for 2 days. You have been gracious, compliant, and have shown no hostility. Yet, we know nothing of you, save for the brief demonstration of your power upon your arrival. I'm an open book, Naruto replied, his tone easy. Ask away. Words are wind, Ains countered, the red lights in his sockets flaring. In Nazarick, power is the only truth. It is the language we all understand. I wish for you to speak this language. Not in anger, but so that we might have a true measure of the being we have welcomed into our home. Albedo shifted her weight, her gauntlet creaking softly. She knew what was coming. You want me to fight, Naruto stated, not a question but a confirmation. I want a demonstration, Ains corrected. A controlled display of your abilities against one of our own. A spar, if you will, held in a location where you can feel free to use your full power without fear of damaging our home. It was a reasonable request, framed as a necessity for mutual understanding. But Naruto saw the truth beneath it. It was a threat assessment. A calculated experiment to probe his strengths, discover his weaknesses, and determine how he could be countered or controlled. They were moving him from a gilded cage to a laboratory. Fine. He had questions of his own, and a fight was the quickest way to get answers. All right, Skeleton Man, Naruto said with a nod. I accept. Who am I fighting? Her. He gestured with his thumb towards Albedo. Albedo's hand instinctively went to her axe. The thought of facing him, of bringing her full power to bear against that golden light, sent a thrill of both terror and a dark, exhilarating excitement through her. No, Ains said, his voice cutting through the tension. The Overseer's presence will be required as an observer. Your opponent will be the guardian of the treasury, Pandora's actor. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Pandora's actor. Weird name. He is my personal creation, Ains explained. A faint, almost undetectable note of pride in his tone. He is a master of many forms, a being uniquely suited to test a wide variety of skills. The treasury itself is the most fortified area in all of Nazarick, protected by the highest tier magic and containing the guild's greatest treasures. It is the only place I can be certain will withstand your power. The unspoken implication was clear. It is also the place from which escape is impossible. Lead the way, Naruto said simply, a small, confident smile playing on his lips. Albedo stepped forward. The treasury is on the 8th floor. But it is not connected to the others. Access is restricted. We must use the ring of Ain's gown. She looked to her master. Ains raised his skeletal hand, a ring on each finger glinting in the gloom. One of them, a gaudy, golden thing, glowed with an intense purple light. A swirling vortex of dark energy, a portal, opened in the air before the throne. The air grew cold, and a wave of negative energy washed over them, so potent it would have killed a normal human instantly. After you, Ains said, gesturing towards the portal. Naruto didn't hesitate. He walked straight into the swirling darkness. Albedo gave a final, formal bow to her master before following, the portal snapping shut behind them with a sound like tearing reality. They emerged not in a corridor, but in a vast, circular antechamber carved from some shimmering, pearlescent stone. The air was thick with the scent of old gold and powerful, dormant enchantments. Before them stood a set of colossal doors made of a material that was not metal or stone, but solidified night, with constellations moving slowly across its surface. Standing at attention before these doors was a figure that made Naruto pause. He looked like an egg-headed caricature of a neo-Nazi officer from some old-world film, complete with a peaked cap and a long, dramatic coat. His face was a simplistic blank with 3 dark holes for his eyes and mouth. A living caricature. This, Naruto deduced, had to be Pandora's actor. Ah, it is a glorious day, the being exclaimed, his voice theatrical and laden with a thick, out-of-place German accent. He snapped a crisp salute, not towards Albedo, but towards the empty space where he clearly expected his creator to be. Mein Schöpfer, you have brought guests to my humble abode. It fills my heart with. He stopped, finally noticing that Ains was not with them. His posture visibly deflated for a fraction of a second. Oh, it is only you, Lady Albedo. And, a human. This is Naruto Uzumaki, guest of Lord Ains. Albedo stated, her tone brooking no argument. Lord Ains has commanded a demonstration of power. You are to be his opponent. Pandora's actor's demeanor shifted instantly. His slouched, disappointed posture straightened into one of military readiness. The blank holes of his face seemed to fix on Naruto with a newfound intensity. A test of combat, wunderbar, he exclaimed, striking a dramatic pose. To be called upon to perform the sacred duty for which I was created. My soul sings. The stage is set. Please, enter the sanctum sanctorum, the heart of Nazarick's glorious might. He turned and pressed his hands against the star-dusted doors. With a low groan that vibrated in their very bones, the gates to the treasury swung inward. Naruto had seen opulence in his travels. The grand halls of daimyo and the hidden temples of sages. But this was something else entirely. It was a mountain of wealth. Not a room, but a cavern so vast he could not see the far walls. Filled with literal mountains of gold coins, shimmering jewels, and glowing weapons stacked like cordwood. Suits of legendary armor stood on display, each one radiating more power than the most sacred artifacts of his world. And floating in the center of the vast chamber were dozens of glowing crystals, each one containing a shimmering, ethereal object, world-class items, the ultimate treasures of this reality. The sheer magical pressure in the room was staggering. It was like standing at the bottom of a sea of pure power. Impressive, Naruto said, his voice quiet. He could feel the history in this place. The countless hours, the passion, the shared adventure that had gone into collecting all of this. This wasn't just a dragon's hoard, it was the legacy of 41 friends. Indeed, Pandora's actor preemed, every item here is a testament to the glory of the supreme beings. He gestured to the vast, open space in the center of the cavern. This shall be our arena. Lady Albedo, If you would be so kind as to observe from a safe distance. The aftershocks of a battle between titans can be messy. Albedo nodded and, with a powerful beat of her wings, ascended to a high vantage point on one of the smaller mountains of gold, her axe held at the ready. She was an observer, yes, but also the final line of defense if things went wrong. Naruto walked to the center of the arena, the crunch of stray gold coins under his sandals the only sound. He faced Pandora's actor, who had taken up a position opposite him. The rules of engagement, as dictated by Lord Ains, are simple, the doppelganger announced. You are to battle until one of us concedes or is rendered unable to fight. You are permitted to use any and all of your abilities. I, in turn, have been granted permis. Scion to utilize 80% of my full capabilities. Are you ready, Haru Uzumaki? Ready when you are, Naruto replied, a calm settling over him. The familiar pre-battle stillness. This was a language he understood better than any other. He didn't immediately flare his chakra or enter sage mode. He just stood there, watching, waiting. It was his opponent's home ground, his challenge. He would let him make the first move. Then let the curtains rise. Pandora's actor shrieked with glee, and in a shimmer of black and purple light, his form melted and reformed. In an instant, the comical egg-headed officer was gone, replaced by the imposing skeletal form of Ains Ulgaon himself, complete with the regal robes and the staff of the guild master. Let us begin with the master's own form. The Ains double declared, his voice a perfect mimicry of the Overlord. Reality slash. He swung the staff, and a blade of pure spatial distortion ripped through the air towards Naruto. It was an attack that didn't travel so much as it simply erased the space between its origin and its target. Naruto didn't dodge, he simply tilted his head to the side. The reality-cutting blade passed by his ear, carving a deep, silent scar into the mountain of gold behind him. A river of coins and gems cascaded down with a deafening roar. Pandora's actor paused. That wasn't a dodge. The attack was instantaneous. To evade it, one had to predict it. Impressive precognition, he noted. Triple maximize magic. Chain dragon lightning. 3 colossal dragons made of pure, crackling black lightning erupted from his outstretched hand, roaring as they converged on Naruto's position. The light from the attack was blinding, the sound deafening. Naruto still didn't move. He simply raised one hand, and one of the truth-seeking orbs hovering behind him shot forward, expanding into a thin, black shield. The lightning dragon slammed into the shield and vanished without a sound. Not blocked, not deflected. Annihilated. The orb absorbed the high-tier spell as if it were nothing more than a raindrop falling into the ocean. High on her perch, Albedo's knuckles were white where she gripped her axe. She knew the power of maximized, high-tier magic. To nullify it so casually, so effortlessly, it was beyond comprehension. On a floating screen in the throne room, the real Ains leaned forward, the red lights in. His eyes burning with an intensity that bordered on madness. No data, no analysis, just absolute, terrifying negation. So this is the power of the supreme beings, Naruto said, his voice calm, but carrying over the din. All that destructive power, but it feels hollow, empty, hollow. Pandora's actor screeched, his Ains persona cracking under the insult. His form shifted again, becoming shorter, more compact. Encased in a suit of gleaming, pearl-white plate armor and holding a shimmering silver shield. The aura around him changed from that of a master mage to an indomitable warrior. He had become Touch Me, the world champion. Let us see how you handle the might of the paladin. He shouted, his voice now that of a noble hero. He shot forward, his speed defying the bulk of his armor. He was a white comet of righteous fury, his sword carving a silver arc through the air. This time, Naruto met him head-on. The room filled with the sound of thunderous impacts as their limbs met. It was not a clash of steel, but of flesh and bone against enchanted plate. Naruto's taijutsu was fluid, economical, a dance of weaves and parries. He moved like water, flowing around the paladin's rigid, powerful strikes. He met a sword strike with the back of his hand, a shield bash with his knee. Each impact sent shockwaves through the treasury, causing the mountains of gold to tremble. Pandora's actor, as Touch Me, was a master of combat, but he was fighting based on a system of skills, cooldowns, and attack patterns. Naruto was fighting with pure instinct, honed by 1,000 real-life battles. He wasn't using skills. He was just fighting. "You're just a copy," Naruto said, his voice level as he caught the warrior's sword arm in a lock. "You have his moves, his power, but you don't have his soul. You don't have his experience." Quote. With a twist, he disarmed the paladin, sending the sword flying, and landed a palm heel strike to his chest. The blow was not infused with any visible energy, but it sent the armored figure flying backwards, crashing into a pile of treasure with a sound like a collapsing building. Before the dust even settled, the form shifted again. The gleaming white armor melted away, replaced by the black, demonic robes of a master sorcerer. Albedo, the being of greatest magical offense in the guild. "You speak of soul, of experience," the new form hissed, his voice dripping with theatrical villainy. "Then experience the soul of catastrophe." He raised his hands, and the ambient mana in the treasury, a literal ocean of power, began to coalesce around him. The air grew thick, dark, and heavy with the promise of ultimate destruction. This was not a simple spell. This was a super-tier spell, an ability that bent the very laws of reality. "The goal of all life is death." Albedo's eyes widened in horror. That was Lord Ains's signature skill, one that could only be used when he was equipped as a full overlord. Pandora's actor was not supposed to be able to use it, but his unique ability was to copy the forms and 80% of the powers of the beings he mimicked, and it seemed his mimicry of his own creator was near perfect. A wave of pure, absolute death magic expanded from him. It was an instant death effect on a massive scale. But Naruto was not undead. He was overflowing with so much life energy that the death magic simply washed over him, unable to find a purchase. It was like trying to douse the sun with a cup of water. "That's a neat trick," Naruto said, his expression unchanged. "But it only works on the living. And you're not really alive, are you?" The Albert form snarled in frustration. "Then taste the ultimate expression of destructive power. A spell that requires the sacrifice of a caster's own experience points to fuel its unimaginable might." Grand catastrophe. Quote. The world went white. An explosion of pure, chaotic magical energy erupted from Pandora's actor. It was not a fireball or a lightning bolt. It was a sun, born in the heart of the treasury. A blast of raw power so immense it could have wiped a city off the map. Ains, watching from his throne, instinctively braced himself, even though he was miles away. Albedo threw her shield arm up, her wings wrapping around her as the wave of heat and force washed over her perch. Naruto stood in the epicenter of the blast. He didn't erect a shield this time. Instead, the golden light that had announced his arrival in Nazarick finally blazed to life. He entered Six Paths Sage mode in an instant, his skin glowing like the sun, the 9 truth-seeking orbs blazing behind him like a halo of black stars. The catastrophic energy of the spell washed against his body, and parted around him, like water flowing around a stone. He stood there, untouched, the very picture of divine indifference. As the light from the spell faded, leaving behind scorched craters in the piles of gold, Naruto floated in the center of the devastation, his expression now serious. "All right, my turn." He moved. He didn't use a teleportation technique. He just moved. He crossed the distance between them in a span of time so small it was functionally zero. One moment he was there, the next, he was standing directly in front of the still recovering Pandora's actor. He didn't throw a punch. He didn't form a Rasengan. He simply placed his hand on the doppelganger's chest. "Sage art. Amphibian kata," he whispered. It was not a destructive technique. It was a perfect application of natural energy. Pandora's actor's body, a thing of pure magic, had no defense against it. The natural energy flowed into him, not to destroy, but to disrupt. It severed the connection between his will and his magical form. His shapeshifting ability sputtered. His control over his vast magical reserves vanished. He froze, completely paralyzed. A statue in the form of a demonic sorcerer. He was not harmed, but he was utterly, completely, and humiliatingly defeated. The silence that followed was absolute. Naruto removed his hand, and the golden aura receded. He looked at the frozen form of his opponent, then turned his gaze towards Albedo, who was staring down at him, her beautiful face a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. But Naruto wasn't looking at her. He was looking past her, his gaze fixed on a far corner of the treasury. Throughout the fight, he had felt it growing stronger. The dissonant, sickly energy he had first sensed in the hallway. Here, so deep beneath the earth, surrounded by so much concentrated power, it was no longer a faint echo. It was a scream. He ignored the defeated Pandora's actor and began to walk towards the source of the feeling. "What are you doing?" Albedo demanded, flying down from her perch to land in his path. "The demonstration is over. The fight is over," Naruto corrected, not breaking his stride. "But I just found something much more interesting." He walked past her, his eyes scanning the endless piles of artifacts. He was like a physician searching for a tumor. He finally stopped before a small, unassuming display. There were no mountains of gold here, just a single object resting on a black pedestal. It was a throne, a small, simple thing carved from a single piece of obsidian. Seemingly absorbing the light around it, it looked unremarkable compared to the glowing, world-destroying weapons nearby. But to Naruto's senses, it was the source of the sickness. "The throne of the fallen king," Albedo breathed, her voice filled with awe and a hint of fear. "It is one of our most powerful world-class items." "It's more than that," Naruto said, his hand hovering over the throne. He could feel the energy trapped within it. It was an echo of a soul, a being of immense power that had been defeated and imprisoned within the item. But the soul was not resting. It was festering, corrupting, leaking its despair and malevolence into the very foundations of Nazarick. "This thing is sick. It's poisoning your home, from the bottom up." In the throne room, Ains stood up from his own throne, a motion he had not made in years. He stared into the viewing mirror, his mind, for the first time, not working as a gamer, but as a king who had just been told his castle had a rotting foundation. He had always known that particular world item had a malevolent aura, a curse attached to its immense power. But he had believed Nazarick's own inherent evil and protections were enough to contain it. He had never considered that it could be a slow, creeping infection. Naruto had not just defeated his secret weapon. He had diagnosed a cancer in the heart of his fortress that he himself had never even known existed. The power dynamic had not just shifted. It had been irrevocably shattered. Naruto Uzumaki was not a tool to be used or a threat to be managed. He was something else entirely. And for the first time since he had arrived in this new world, Ains Ulgaon, the Overlord of Death, felt a cold, unfamiliar emotion that his emotional suppressor could not quite contain. It was fear. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Sickness of a God. The treasury was silent save for the soft, metallic sigh of shifting gold coins. The echoes of a battle that had shaken the very foundations of the tomb had faded, leaving behind an atmosphere thick with tension. Pandora's actor stood frozen, a statue of a demon lord defeated not by overwhelming force, but by a touch. Albedo stood between Naruto and the unassuming obsidian throne, her body a rigid line of defiance, her axe held in a low guard. Her orders had been to observe, but to allow a guest, even this guest. To tamper with a world-class item was a betrayal of her most fundamental duty. "Do not touch it," she commanded, her voice low and dangerous. "Step away, Naruto Uzumaki. That is not a toy." Naruto's gaze did not waver from the throne. He could feel her killing intent, a familiar prickle against his senses. He had felt stronger waves of it from cornered animals. He looked at her, not with annoyance, but with a weary patience. "Your home has a splinter," he said, his voice calm and even. "It's been festering for a long time, so you've gotten used to the pain. You don't even notice it anymore. But it's there, leaking poison into the heart of this place. That throne isn't just a powerful item. It's a prison, and the prisoner is screaming." In the throne room, Ains stood rigid before the viewing mirror. The scene playing out in perfect clarity. His skeletal fingers were steepled before his lipless mouth. Poison, a prisoner. He had always known the throne of the fallen king was a cursed item. Its immense power to summon legions of demons offset by a corrupting aura that could drive the unworthy insane. He had assumed Nazarick's own inherent evil immunities were more than enough to negate the drawback. But Naruto was describing something else, not a passive curse, but an active, malevolent consciousness. "Albedo," Ains's voice echoed from a message spell only she could hear, making her flinch. "Stand down. Do not interfere. Observe and report every detail." Her eyes widened in disbelief. My lord, he orders me to permit this. Her loyalty warred with her instincts, but the command was absolute. With a visible effort that made the plates of her armor grind together, she lowered her axe. She did not move from her spot, but her posture shifted from that of a combatant to a tense, coiled observer. Naruto gave her a small nod of acknowledgement before turning his full attention back to the throne. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and reached out, not with his hand, but with his mind. With the very essence of his being. He plunged his senses into the obsidian artifact. What he found was not a simple enchantment or a lingering curse. It was a hell, a maelstrom of rage, despair, and an ancient, undying hatred. He saw fragmented images that were not his own. A sky filled with silver fleets, a war fought on a scale that dwarfed his own, and a crushing, final defeat. He felt the consciousness of a being that had once commanded galaxies, now reduced to a single, infinitely repeating moment of failure and agony. It was a god, or something close to it, trapped in the wreckage of its own broken divinity. This was the source of the sickness. The constant, silent scream of a defeated deity, leaking out like radiation, subtly twisting the energy of the tomb, amplifying its negative aspects. Feeding its darkness. I see, Naruto whispered, opening his eyes. They glowed with a soft, golden light. You lost, and they locked you in your own throne so you could never forget. Albedo stared, confused. What are you talking about? The being in here, Naruto said, gesturing to the throne. It's not just an aura. It's a remnant, a soul, or what's left of one. And it's in constant pain. He looked from the throne to Albedo, and his expression was one of profound empathy. I'm not going to destroy it. I'm going to help it. Before she could process the sheer absurdity of his statement, he placed both his hands on the cold, light-absorbing obsidian. The reaction was instantaneous and violent. A wave of pure, black energy erupted from the throne, a psychic shriek of pure malevolence. The air grew cold enough to freeze breath, and shadows in the vast treasury seemed to writhe and deepen. Albedo instinctively raised her axe, the divine class weapon MMING in protest against the tide of profane energy. Pandora's actor, finally released from his paralysis by the shockwave, stumbled back, his blank face a mask of horror. But Naruto did not flinch. He golden aura of six paths sage mode blazed around him, a shield of life and warmth against the encroaching despair. The black energy crashed against him and dissipated, unable to touch him. I'm not your enemy, Naruto said, his voice soft but resonant, speaking to the soul within the throne. I know what it's like to have a monster locked inside you. To be filled with a rage that isn't your own. But you don't have to live like that. Quote, he began to pour his own energy into the throne. It wasn't the destructive force of a Rasengan or the sharp edge of a chakra blade. It was the pure, creative force of the universe. The same power the Sage of Six Paths had used to create form from nothingness. It was an energy of pure positivity, of life, of understanding. It was a light that did not seek to burn the darkness, but to show it that it was no longer alone. The throne began to glow from within, a faint golden light tracing unseen cracks in the obsidian. The malevolent shriek intensified as the trapped consciousness fought back, lashing out with millennia of stored-up hatred. The entire treasury began to shake. Mountains of gold shifted, and legendary weapons rattled in their racks. High above, Albedo watched, mesmerized. This was not a battle of power levels and special abilities. It was a battle of philosophies, a war between two opposing concepts. The absolute despair of a fallen God versus the indomitable will of a young man who had never given up. She saw beads of sweat on Naruto's brow. His jaw was clenched in concentration. The golden aura around him flickered, proving that this was a monumental effort. Even for him, he was vulnerable. He was straining, putting himself at risk, not to gain power or defeat a foe, but to heal a wound in an enemy he had never met. A strange, fierce emotion swelled in her chest. It was a feeling that had no place in the logical, ordered world of Nazarick. It was a primal, protective instinct. She wanted to stand beside him, to guard his back, to smite the screaming darkness that was causing him such strain. The thought was so powerful, so contrary to her mission, that it made her tremble. In the throne room, Ains was no longer sitting. He was pacing, a frantic, agitated motion that spoke of a mind in utter chaos. He was watching a being perform a miracle that defied every law of his world. Magic in his world was a tool, a weapon. It could create fire or ice, raise the dead or kill the living. But it could not heal a soul. It could not cure a concept. What Naruto was doing was not magic. It was something far more fundamental. He had brought a god into his house, and that god was now rearranging the furniture of reality. Ains saw the strain on Naruto's face. A part of him, the cold, calculating gamer, whispered that this was an opportunity to strike him down in his moment of weakness, to eliminate the variable, but he crushed the thought. To do so would be to make an enemy of a being who could rewrite the laws of existence. More than that, he was fixing a flaw in Ains's own fortress, increasing the value of a world item at great personal cost and for no apparent gain. The sheer altruism of the act was the most terrifying thing of all. It was a variable he could not calculate, a motivation he could not comprehend. Back in the treasury, the battle reached its crescendo. A final, desperate wave of black energy, the very essence of the fallen god's despair, pulsed from the throne. But this time, Naruto's golden light did not just repel it. It met it, surrounded it, and suffused it. It was not an act of destruction, but of acceptance. The psychic screaming stopped. The violent shaking ceased. The oppressive, malevolent aura that had saturated the very air of the treasury for centuries vanished, replaced by a profound, peaceful silence. The obsidian of the throne no longer seemed to absorb the light. Instead, it now held a soft, internal luminescence, a faint golden glow that pulsed like a sleeping heart. The curse was not broken. It was soothed. The prisoner was not freed. He was finally at peace. Naruto slumped forward, his hands falling away from the throne. The golden aura vanished completely, and he staggered. The sheer exhaustion of the ordeal hitting him all at once. He looked paler, smaller, startlingly human. Before he could fall, a strong grip steadied him. Albedo had closed the distance in an instant. Her armored hand holding his arm, her other hand instinctively resting on his back. The act was so reflexive she didn't realize she had done it until she felt the warmth of his skin through his tattered jumpsuit. She was touching him, supporting him. The overseer of the floor guardians, who despised all humans, was holding up a man from another world who had just rewritten the nature of her home. "Are you all right?" The question was out before she could stop it, her voice laced with a genuine concern that shocked her to the core. "Just tired," Naruto breathed, leaning on her for a moment. That was a lot of anger. He looked up at her, his blue eyes clear but weary, and offered a small, grateful smile. "Thanks." The contact, the smile, the sheer proximity to him in his moment of vulnerability sent a jolt through Albedo. Her mind, her very being, was a battlefield. Her loyalty to Ains, her duty, her hatred of humans, her pride as a denizen of Nazarick, all of it was being assaulted by the undeniable truth of what she had just witnessed, and the even more undeniable warmth of his hand on her gauntlet. Slowly, carefully, she helped him straighten up. She released him, but the phantom sensation of his presence lingered. On the other side of the room, Pandora's actor, having reverted to his default form, was staring at the transformed throne with his blank, three-holed face. "Remarkable," he whispered, his voice stripped of its usual theatrics. "The item's data has been recontextualized. The negative karmic values have been neutralized. The power remains, but the poison is gone. How is this possible?" "Let's go," Naruto said, his voice still quiet. "I think I've overstayed my welcome in your vault." The walk back was conducted in a profound silence. No portal was opened. They walked, Albedo guiding a tired but steady Naruto, with Pandora's actor trailing behind like a confused ghost. When they reached his suite, Albedo dismissed the maids who were waiting to attend to him and escorted him inside alone. He collapsed onto one of the plush sofas, letting out a long, weary sigh. Albedo stood by the door, watching him, her internal conflict raging. Finally, she closed the doors and walked towards him. "Why?" she asked, the single word carrying the weight of 1,000 questions. "Why did you do that? It was not your concern. It was not your home. You gained nothing from it." Naruto looked up at her, at the beautiful, terrifying succubus in her impossible armor, her face a mask of confusion and turmoil. "Because it was hurting," he said, his voice simple and clear. Devoid of any grand philosophy. No one deserves to be in that much pain. Not forever. It doesn't matter if they're a king, or a god, or a monster locked in a chair. Pain is pain, and if I can stop it, I will. The answer was so simple, so direct, so utterly antithetical to the ethos of Nazareth, that it broke through her defenses. It was not a strategic calculation. It was not a display of power. It was an act of pure, unadulterated compassion. A quality she was programmed to see as a weakness, but had just witnessed as a force strong enough to pacify a god's rage. A single, crystalline tear formed in the corner of her eye and traced a shimmering path down her perfect cheek. She was not programmed to cry. She was not supposed to feel this. But she did. Far away, in a chamber of polished silver lit by the cold light of distant stars, a figure sat in meditation. His skin was the color of moonlight, and his long, white hair was braided with threads of pure starlight. He was a member of the Argent Council, a being who watched the flow of cosmic energies, the rise and fall of gods. For centuries, he had felt the faint, constant thrum of a familiar energy signature from the world below, the hateful, desperate prison of an old enemy. It had been a background noise for so long, a reminder of a victory won in an age of myth. And then, suddenly, the signal changed. The angry, hateful scream that had echoed in the cosmic winds for millennia, stopped. It was replaced by a profound silence, and then, for a fleeting instant, a burst of pure, golden warmth so potent and unfamiliar that it made him open his silver eyes in shock. Someone had not just broken the prison. They had healed the prisoner. He stood up, his silver robes shimmering. An impossible event had occurred. A power utterly alien to this world had manifested. He walked to a grand celestial map that filled one wall of the chamber. A tiny, insignificant point of light, long dormant, was now pulsing with a faint, golden light. Deep within a forgotten corner of the world. The anathema key is silent, he murmured, his voice like the chime of crystal bells. What has woken up in that forsaken tomb? The long peace was over. A new god was on the board. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Politics of a Miracle. The single tear that traced a path down Albedo's cheek felt like a brand of molten silver. It was an involuntary betrayal. A system error in the perfect machinery of her being. She was a creature of logic and loyalty, of divine programming and absolute devotion. She was not meant for this messy, saltwater weakness. With a sharp, angry motion, she wiped the tear away with the back of her gauntlet, the metal scraping softly against her skin. The act was one of self-chastisement, a physical rejection of the emotional heresy taking place within her. Naruto watched her, his weariness momentarily forgotten. He saw the violent conflict in her eyes, the war between the overseer and the woman. He didn't say anything. He knew, better than most, that some battles had to be fought alone. "You require rest," she stated, her voice having regained its cold, formal edge. The wall was back up, thicker and higher than before. "I will have the maids bring you sustenance. Do not leave this room." It was not a request, it was an order. Without waiting for a reply, she turned and marched out. The heavy doors closing with a definitive, resounding boom, shutting him in with the silence and her in with the storm. She did not return to her post outside his door. She strode through the hallowed, empty halls of the 9th floor, her mind a maelstrom. What she had witnessed in the treasury was impossible. What she had felt was blasphemy. Compassion, protection, awe that was not directed at a supreme being. These were corrupting data points in her immaculate code. She needed to purge them, to reaffirm her purpose. She needed to report to her master. The miracle had to be dissected, catalogued, and turned into a strategic asset for the glory of Nazareth. That was the only way to make sense of it. By the time she reached the throne room, Ains had already summoned the others. The floor guardians, with the exception of Victim and Gargantua, were assembled before the throne. Demiurge stood with a thoughtful, calculating smile, his tail twitching in intellectual excitement. Cocytus was a pillar of frosted blue chitin. His forearms crossed, his warrior's senses still trying to process the residual power he had felt shake the tomb. Shaltir Bloodfallen was tapping an elegantly clawed finger against her cheek. Her crimson eyes narrowed with a mixture of intense curiosity and profound irritation. Aura and Mare stood together, Aura bouncing on the balls of her feet, while Mare nervously fidgeted with the hem of his tunic. Pandora's actor was there as well, standing off to the side, his posture unusually subdued, the very picture of a weapon that had been comprehensively outclassed. Ains sat upon his throne, a silent, imposing figure of death. But Albedo, who knew his every nuance, could see the tension in the way his skeletal fingers gripped the armrests. He was not calm. He was a king sitting on a powder keg, and the fuse had just been lit. Albedo, Ains's voice boomed, cutting through the silence. You have returned. Report. Tell us precisely what occurred in the treasury. She knelt, bowing her head. As you command, Lord Ains. She recounted the events with perfect, clinical detail. She described the spar, Pandora's actor's transformations, the casual nullification of high-tier magic, the untouchable defense of the black orbs, and the fluid, instinctual combat that had rendered the guild's world champion mimic helpless. Her voice was a steady monotone. Then, she described his interaction with the throne of the fallen king. She spoke of the wave of malevolent energy, Naruto's strange dialogue with the imprisoned soul, and the torrent of golden, posy Tive energy he had poured into the artifact. The result, she concluded, her voice unwavering, was the complete neutralization of the item's corrupting curse. The malevolent consciousness within has been pacified. The item is now safe to be handled by any being, without risk of mental contamination. A wave of stunned silence washed over the Guardians. Demiurge was the first to break it, a low, appreciative chuckle escaping his lips. Subarashi, he whispered, his smile widening into a grin of pure, predatory delight. Truly magnificent. To not destroy, but to subjugate the will of a cursed world item, Lord Ains. This being you have brought to us is not a mere anomaly. He is an unparalleled resource. The potential applications are limitless. His mind was already racing, seeing Naruto as a living key. A tool capable of unlocking, purifying, and weaponizing artifacts that had long been considered too dangerous to even study. His power is absolute, Cocytus stated, his deep, ling voice filled with a warrior's simple, profound respect. He fought with honor and restraint. He did not seek to harm Pandora's actor, only to defeat him. His spirit is that of a true warrior. For Cocytus, the method of victory was as important as the victory itself. Shultir, however, was not impressed. She scoffed, a delicate, aristocratic sound of pure disdain. Honor, restraint, it sounds to me like an unseemly display. This pet human of yours, Lord Ains, waltzes into our home, insults our creators, and then performs parlor tricks on our sacred treasures. Her jealousy was a palpable force in the room. She was the strongest of the floor guardians, the one-on-one specialist. To hear of a power that so casually dwarfed her own, wielded by an outsider, was a deep and personal insult. I should have been the one to test him. I would have shown him the true power of Nazarick. You would have been defeated, Shultir, Pandora's actor said quietly, his voice devoid of its usual flair. The admission was startling, coming from a being known for his dramatic pride. His abilities do not operate on the same principles as ours. It is like trying to catch water in a net. My attacks, even those of the supreme beings I copied, were irrelevant to him. Shultir's face contorted in a brief flash of rage before she schooled her features back into a mask of bored indifference. He made Mare a flower. Aura chirped, ever the one to cut through the tension. He was really nice. He wasn't scary at all. Mare nodded shyly in agreement, clutching an imaginary flower in his hand. Ains listened to the conflicting reports, his mind processing the data. Demiurge saw a tool, Cocytus, a warrior, Shultir, a rival, the twins, a friend, and Albedo. He looked down at the overseer, still kneeling. Her head bowed. She had delivered the facts, but she had offered no opinion. Her report was a perfect, cold recitation, yet he knew her better than that. He had created her, in a way. The silence from Albedo was more telling than all the others' words combined. He had lost control of the narrative. This being, Naruto, was defining himself to the denizens of Nazarick on his own terms. And Ains was being relegated to the role of an observer in his own home. This could not stand. He had to reassert his authority, to frame this event not as something that had happened to Nazarick, but as something he, Ains Ul Gaon, had orchestrated. Enough, he commanded. The room fell silent. I have heard your reports. Your opinions have been noted. He leaned forward, the red light in his eyes sweeping over them all. Do not mistake what you have witnessed for a loss of control. Everything proceeds according to my will. The arrival of Naruto Uzumaki was an unexpected variable, but one that I have chosen to incorporate into my grand design. He let the lie hang in the air, its sheer audacity giving it the weight of truth. His power is, as we have seen, considerable. His motivations, however, remain a mystery. This act of healing, it is an expression of a philosophy utterly alien to us. To understand it, we must observe it in its natural habitat. Ains paused for dramatic effect. Therefore, I have decided, the period of confinement is over. Naruto Uzumaki will be allowed to venture outside the great tomb of Nazarick. Another wave of shock rippled through the Guardians. To allow the anomaly out into the world. He will not go alone, of course, Ains continued, his voice taking on the tone of a master strategist revealing his winning move. He will be given a task, a mission, to test his character, and he will be accompanied by one of you, to observe his methods, to gauge his reaction to the natives of this world, and to ensure Nazarick's interests are protected. He looked down at the kneeling succubus. Albedo, you were the first to encounter him. You have observed him most closely. The responsibility will be yours. You will be his partner in this endeavor. You will guide him. You will watch him, and you will report everything back to me. This is the most critical intelligence-gathering mission we have yet undertaken. Do you understand? It was a brilliant move. A masterstroke of political maneuvering. It placed Ains firmly back in control. It gave Naruto a purpose defined by Nazarick. And it took the two beings most affected by this new variable, Naruto and Albedo, and forced them together, ensuring the one person who seemed most conflicted by him would be the primary source of information. Albedo's head snapped up, her emerald eyes wide. To be sent out, alone, with him, away from Nazarick, away from the reassuring presence of her master. It was a test of her loyalty, a crucible designed to burn away the impurities of her recent confusion. And yet, a treacherous, thrilling part of her felt a jolt of something that was not fear, but anticipation. I understand, Lord Ains, she said, her voice a resonant declaration of fealty. I will not fail you. I will uncover the very nature of his soul and deliver it to you for the glory of Nazarick. I expect nothing less, Ains said, settling back into his throne. Go, inform our guest of his new assignment. Naruto was meditating. He sat cross-legged in the center of his opulent sitting room, his breathing slow and even. The act of pacifying the throne had drained him more than he had let on. It was like performing a spiritual exorcism on a continental scale, but it had also centered him, connected him to the very bedrock of this strange, new world. He could feel the flow of its life, the sluggish, non-chakra energy that animated it. It was a world in pain. A world scarred by ancient wars and ruled by beings who saw life as a resource. When the doors opened, he didn't need to open his eyes to know it was Albedo. Her energy was a unique signature in this tomb of death and magic, a furious, disciplined storm of devotion, pride, and a new, unsettling current of confusion. You have a new assignment for me, he said, his eyes still closed. Albedo stopped short. How did you know? Your boss isn't the type to let a potential asset sit on the shelf and collect dust, Naruto replied, opening his eyes. He looked refreshed, the weariness gone, replaced by a clear, focused calm. He's done analyzing me in the lab. Now he wants to see what I do in the field. So, what is it? Some dragon to slay, a kingdom to intimidate. His casual, accurate assessment of her master's intentions was unnerving. She pushed the feeling aside and adopted her formal, professional tone. There is a human village, not far from the borders of Nazarick's immediate influence. Carne Village. It has recently come under attack by soldiers masquerading as knights of a foreign nation. Lord Ains, in his infinite wisdom and mercy, wishes to extend his protection to these troubled people. Naruto raised an eyebrow. His infinite mercy. The giant skeleton surrounded by monsters wants to play hero to a human village. You question the motives of the Supreme One. Albedo's voice was sharp. I question everyone's motives, Naruto countered calmly. It's how I've stayed alive. So, he wants to protect this village. What does that have to do with me? You will be the instrument of that protection, she explained. You will go to this village. You will assess the threat. And you will eliminate it. I am to accompany you. To act as Lord Ains's eyes and to provide support, should you require it. It was, Naruto thought, a perfect test. Simple, direct. How would he handle a genuine threat? How would he interact with helpless humans? Would he be a butcher or a savior? Ains wanted to see his true colors. Fine. He was tired of being cooped up anyway. All right, he said, standing up in a single, fluid motion. I'm in. When do we leave? His immediate acceptance seemed to surprise her. She had expected more questions, more suspicion. We can depart immediately. I will have preparations made. Don't need them, Naruto said, stretching his arms over his head. I travel light. He walked towards her, stopping just a few feet away. He was not in his godlike state, but his sheer presence, his vitality, felt overwhelming in the enclosed space. This will be interesting, Albedo, he said, a genuine, almost boyish smile on his face. You get to see me in action. And I get to see what you're really like when the Skeleton King isn't looking over your shoulder. The comment was a direct hit, and her cheeks flushed with a mixture of anger and something else she refused to name. Before she could form a scathing retort, he had already walked past her and was opening the doors to the hallway. Well, let's go. Wouldn't want to keep those villagers waiting. Miles above, in a realm of cold starlight, the being known as Lyrasil stood before the celestial map. He had spent the last cycle in deep communion with the cosmos, trying to decipher the nature of the golden energy he had felt. It was not divine in the way he understood it. It was not born of faith or worship. It felt personal, innate, the power of a single, extraordinary soul. A figure knelt behind him, a being CL. Add in armor that seemed woven from moonlight and shadow. You summoned me, my lord. The newcomer's voice was devoid of emotion, a perfect instrument of will. Inquisitor Kalis, Lyrasil said, not turning. A new power has manifested in the mortal realm, within the borders of the ancient tomb. The anathema key has been silenced by its influence. I want to know what it is. Shall I assemble a purification squad? Inquisitor Kalis asked, his voice still flat. No, Lyrasil commanded. This is not a task for an army. The energy is not aggressive, merely potent. You will go alone. You will be my eyes. Observe this new power. Ascertain its nature, its intent, and its weaknesses. Do not engage unless you are discovered or it proves to be a world-ending threat. We have slept for too long, Kalis. It is time to see what monsters have grown in the dark. The Inquisitor bowed his head. It will be done. With a whisper of displaced air, he vanished, leaving Lyrasil alone with the stars. A new piece was on the great board, and he had just made his first move. The game had begun anew. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Weight of Kindness. The exit from the great tomb of Nazarick was not through a gate, but a shimmer of distorted air on a barren, windswept plain under a sky choked with violet clouds. For Naruto, the transition was like surfacing from the deepest ocean. The air, thin and cold, was a shock to his lungs after the sterile, recycled atmosphere of the tomb. It was real. He could taste the dust, smell the distant rain, feel the weak, gray sunlight on his skin. He closed his eyes and took a deep, shuddering breath, a grin spreading across his face. It was the first truly free breath he'd taken since he'd arrived in this world. For Albedo, the experience was the precise opposite. It was a violation. The chaotic, unpredictable wind that whipped at her dress and wings, the uneven ground beneath her armored heels, the sheer, unstructured emptiness of the landscape, it was all an offense to the perfect, ordered reality of her home. The air was thin and reeked of dirt and dying things. The light was harsh and unfiltered. This was the world her creators had left behind, the world that Lord Ains now sought to claim. Her first impression was that it was a chaotic, primitive mess, unworthy of their notice. She stood in her full, magnificent black armor, a figure of impossible dark majesty against the drab landscape. She was a living fortress, her helmet held under one arm, her expression a mask of aristocratic disdain. Naruto, by contrast, seemed to sink into the world. His orange jumpsuit a slash of vibrant color against the gray, his posture relaxed, his senses drinking in the novel sensations. "So this is the outside world," she commented, her voice laced with a faint, clinical disgust. "It is unimpressive. Are you kidding? It's amazing," Naruto countered, turning in a slow circle, his arms spread wide. "Listen, you can hear the wind. You can feel the sun, even through the clouds. There are bugs and birds and things living and dying out here. It's messy and real. Don't you feel it?" "I feel a distinct lack of the glorious, mana-infused atmosphere of Nazarick," she replied stiffly. "And a surplus of potential allergens." Naruto laughed, a genuine, hearty sound that seemed startlingly loud in the open air. "You've been cooped up in that tomb for too long. You've forgotten what it's like to be alive." The comment struck a nerve. "I am more alive than any of the sniveling insects that inhabit this world. My life has a purpose, given to me by the supreme beings. I exist to serve the glory of Nazarick." "That's a purpose, sure," Naruto said, starting to walk in the direction she indicated the village lay. "But it's not a life. A life is what you do between the big, important moments of serving your purpose." They walked in silence for a time, a study in contrasts. The divine warrior in the armor of a demon queen and the golden god in the clothes of a genin. Albedo moved with a rigid, regal grace, her steps precise, her senses on high alert for any conceivable threat. Naruto ambled, his hands behind his head, his gaze sweeping the houris. On with a practiced ease that was far more observant than her tense vigilance. He saw the hawk circling miles above, noted the tracks of a deer that had passed hours ago, felt the subtle shift in the air that promised rain. "This village," he said, breaking the silence. "Carne. What's so special about it?" "It is nothing," Albedo stated flatly. "A collection of insignificant human lives. Its sole importance is that it exists within the sphere of Lord Ains's interest. He himself saved it from the very soldiers who now threaten it again. His actions there were what first announced the presence of Ains Ulgaun to this world." Naruto nodded, processing the information. "So it's not about the village. It's a message. Ains is using them to make a statement. Lord Ains's plans are as vast and unknowable as the starry sky." She recited, the words sounding practiced, like a line from a holy text. "It is not our place to comprehend them, only to execute his will." "You really believe that, don't you?" Naruto asked, his voice softer, not mocking but genuinely curious. "That you're just a tool, an axe to be swung when he points?" Albedo stopped walking, turning to face him. Her emerald eyes flashed with a dangerous light. "I am Ginnungagap," she said, her voice dropping to a low, resonant growl as she tapped the pommel of the massive battle axe on her back. "A world item, a weapon capable of destroying continents. And I am Albedo, the overseer, whose loyalty to the supreme beings is as absolute as the law of gravity. To be a tool in the hands of a god is the highest honor a creation can aspire to. But what happens when the god puts the tool back in the box?" Naruto shot back, his easygoing demeanor gone, replaced by a sharp, piercing intensity. "What are you then, Albedo? When there are no orders to follow, no enemies to crush, who are you when you're just you?" The question struck the very core of her identity. Her programming provided no answer. The concept was a paradox. A world without orders, without Lord Ains, was a world without meaning, without existence. Her hesitation was only a second long, but in that second, Naruto saw a flicker of profound, terrifying uncertainty in her eyes. "My loyalty is my identity," she finally said, the words a shield. A concept a lesser being like a human could never understand. She turned and resumed her march, her pace faster, more aggressive. As if she could outrun the question he had planted in her mind. They arrived at the outskirts of Carne village as the weak sun began its descent. From a wooded rise, they looked down upon the small collection of simple, wooden houses. A hastily constructed palisade wall surrounded it, a clear sign of a community under siege. They could see villagers moving about, their postures hunched with weariness and fear. A few guards, little more than farmers with pitchforks and leather caps, patrolled the wall with a grim, hopeless determination. Naruto closed his eyes, extending his senses. He felt the collective heartbeat of the village, a rhythm of fear, yes, but also a stubborn, defiant spark of life. He felt the innocence of the children, the anxiety of the parents, the weary resilience of the elders. These were good people, caught in the machinations of powers they couldn't comprehend. Then, he felt something else. A faint, ugly stain on the edge of his perception. The cold, disciplined malice of trained killers. "They're coming back," he said, his voice low. "Indeed," Albedo replied, her eyes glowing faintly as she activated a magical vision enhancement skill. "Approximately 60 soldiers, approaching from the southeast. Better armor than standard kingdom knights. Several are emitting low-tier magical signatures. They are moving to encircle the village. A professional extermination squad." She looked at him, her expression a mixture of anticipation and challenge. "This is your test, Naruto Uzumaki. Lord Ainz wishes to see how you will be the instrument of his protection." A single, overwhelming display of power would suffice. Erase them from existence. Burn their memory from the land. It will be a fitting tribute to the glory of Ainz Ulgaon. It was the Nazarick way. The only way she understood. Naruto looked from the approaching soldiers to the village below, where a mother was calling her child in from playing near the wall. He saw the child run into his mother's arms. Saw the look of terror and love on her face as she hurried him inside. "No," he said quietly. Albedo's eyebrow arched. "No, you refuse the mission. I refuse to do it your way," he clarified, turning his piercing blue eyes on her. "You don't use a tidal wave to put out a candle, especially when a family is living in the candle holder. There are rules to this. Rule 1. The villagers don't get hurt. Rule 2. The village doesn't get destroyed. Rule 3. He paused, a grim smile touching his lips. "No one has to die tonight." Albedo stared at him as if he had just sprouted a second head. "You intend to spare them. The insects who threaten Lord Ainz's property. That is not mercy. It is foolishness. It is a weakness that will only invite further aggression." "It's not weakness," Naruto said, his body already tensing, gathering energy. "It's control." Before she could argue further, he was gone. He didn't vanish in a flash of light or a swirl of leaves. He just ceased to be there. Down below, the captain of the Sunlight Scripture, his face grim beneath his helmet, gave the signal. "Breach the wall. Suffer no survivors. For the glory of the 6 gods." His men, clad in the plate of the slain theocracy, advanced, their movements a disciplined, deadly march. A cleric at the back began to chant, his hands glowing with the light of a low-tier holy spell, ready to summon an angel to sow terror. They never reached the wall. A flicker of orange and black, too fast for the eye to properly track, moved among them. The first soldier to fall didn't even make a sound. His body simply went limp, his eyes rolling back in his head as he collapsed in a heap. A precise strike to a nerve cluster at the base of his neck. The man next to him turned, confused, only to have his leg buckle as a swift, disabling kick swept his knee. A third man's sword was plucked from his hand and its pommel was used to strike him unconscious in a single, fluid motion. It was not a battle. It was a harvest. Naruto moved through their ranks like a phantom, a whisper of displaced air. He used only his hands and feet, his movements a blur of perfect, economical grace. There were no jutsu, no glowing orbs, no godlike displays of power. It was pure, terrifying taijutsu. He disabled each soldier with a strike that was precise, non-lethal, and utterly final. He shattered elbows, dislocated shoulders, and used pressure points to render his opponents unconscious before they even realized they were under attack. The cleric looked up from his chant, his eyes wide with terror. Just as Naruto's hand gently chopped down on his collarbone, instantly breaking his concentration and his will to fight. The entire engagement lasted less than 30 seconds. 60 armed and trained soldiers lay on the forest floor, groaning, unconscious, or simply unable to move, their bodies a tangled mess of broken but not life-threatening injuries. The captain was the last one standing, his sword held aloft. His face a mask of disbelief as he stared at the impossible aftermath. He looked around wildly for the source of the attack, but saw nothing. Then, a voice spoke from right behind him. "You should go home." The captain spun around, his heart seizing in his chest. The golden-haired man in the strange orange clothes was standing there, his hands in his pockets, his expression calm. He hadn't heard him approach. He hadn't felt a thing. "Demon." The captain spat, swinging his sword in a desperate, panicked arc. Naruto didn't even move his hands from his pockets. He simply swayed his body, the blade passing harmlessly an inch from his face. With a slight, almost lazy movement of his leg, he kicked the captain's ankle, sending him sprawling to the ground. He loomed over the fallen soldier, his shadow falling across his face. "Tell your bosses to leave this village alone," Naruto said, his voice no longer calm, but carrying a cold, hard edge of absolute authority. "There's a new god watching over it now, and he's not as merciful as I am." He then tapped his foot lightly on the captain's helmet. The man's world went black. On the hill, Albedo stood frozen, her mind utterly unable to process what she had just seen. It was the most brutally efficient and simultaneously the most ridiculously merciful act of violence she had ever witnessed. He had the power to turn them all to ash with a thought. To summon meteors from the sky, to do what Lord Ains would have done. But he hadn't. He had chosen the difficult path. The path of restraint, of precision, of kindness. He protected the village without destroying its enemies, without even truly harming them. It was inefficient, illogical, weak, and it was the most terrifyingly powerful thing she had ever seen. Naruto walked out of the forest and strolled towards the village gates, now crowded with wide-eyed, terrified villagers who had heard the brief commotion. He stopped before them, raised a hand in a friendly wave, and gave them a broad, disarming smile. "Everything's all right now," he said, his voice warm and reassuring. "You won't be bothered again." Far above, cloaked in spells of invisibility and silenk, that rendered him undetectable to all but the most powerful of beings, Inquisitor Kalis floated against the violet clouds. He had witnessed the entire event through a scrying lens of celestial silver. His emotionless face held the faintest flicker of something akin to confusion. His mission was to assess the new power, to gauge its threat. The data he had just collected was a complete contradiction. The subject possessed speed that broke the laws of physics and a combat prowess that could challenge a god, yet he had used it to non-lethally disable a group of mortals that were, to him, less than insects. Threat level, incalculable, Kalis murmured to himself, his voice a whisper on the wind. Intent, unknowable, a power of absolute destruction wielded for preservation. The council must be informed. This is not a god. This is not a demon. This is something new. Albedo remained on the hill, a solitary figure of black armor, watching as Naruto, the golden god, was cautiously welcome into the village of mortals he had saved. She held a message scroll in her gauntleted hand, its parchment cool against her skin. She was supposed to report to Lord Ains, to tell him of the test's result. But what could she say? The subject completed the mission, but refused to kill the enemy. The acid has neutralized the threat, but in the process has displayed a dangerous sentimentality. No, that wasn't the truth. She looked down at the scroll, then back at the scene below. He was laughing with the village chief, his presence not that of a conqueror, but a guardian. A hero. The truth was far more dangerous. Far more complicated. The truth was that she had just witnessed a kind of strength that Nazarick, in all its power and glory, could never hope to possess. And it was changing her. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Seeds of a Village. The villagers of Karne stared at Naruto as if he were a ghost who had just saved them from a fire. Their fear of the soldiers had been swiftly and incomprehensibly replaced by a new, more profound awe of their savior. He stood before their patched-up gate, the setting sun casting a golden halo around his silhouette, a stark contrast to the grim twilight. He wasn't bleeding. He wasn't even breathing heavily. He was just smiling, a warm, reassuring expression that was so at odds with the impossible violence they had just witnessed that it caused a fundamental disconnect in their minds. The village chief, a stooped man with a weathered face and eyes that had seen too much, was the first to find his voice. You defeated them all. Just like that. They won't be getting up for a while, Naruto said cheerfully. Gave them a bit of a headache, is all. They'll get the message. He looked at the crude wooden walls, the fear-haunted faces of the farmers and their families. This place felt familiar. It was like a younger, more fragile Konoha, a small light struggling to stay lit in a world of darkness. He felt an immediate, instinctual need to protect it. Who are you? A young woman with fiery red hair asked, stepping forward. She held the hands of two small children, but there was a core of steel in her posture that the others lacked. This was Henry Emmett, the unlikely leader of the village's goblin troop and its de facto commander. Before Naruto could answer, a shadow fell over them. It was a cold, sharp-edged darkness that seemed to leach the warmth from the air. Albedo had descended from the hill. She landed behind Naruto with the silent, predatory grace of a hawk, her black armor absorbing the last rays of sunlight. Her beautiful, severe face was an unreadable mask, her emerald eyes sweeping over the villagers with an expression of utter indifference, as if she were examining fungi on a fallen log. The villagers, who had just begun to relax in Naruto's presence, recoiled as one. The children behind Henry whimpered and hid their faces in her skirt. The guards gripped their pitchforks tighter, their knuckles wide, with a fear far more primal than what the soldiers had inspired. This woman was not a human in armor. She was a nightmare given form. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki," Naruto said, his voice cutting through the terrified silence. He gestured casually over his shoulder. "And this is my associate, Albedo. We're here on behalf of Ain Gaon." The name of their previous savior, the powerful magic caster, rippled through the crowd. It brought a measure of understanding, but no comfort. If this terrifying woman was a servant of Ain Gaon, then their lord was a being of unimaginable dread. Lord Ains has noted your plight and extended his benevolent protection, Albedo stated, her voice a melodic, chilling monotone. It was a queen addressing insects. "You are now the property of the great tomb of Nazarick. You will show the proper gratitude." Naruto shot her a sharp, sidelong glance. "Property, gratitude, that wasn't how you helped people. That was how you enslaved them." He stepped forward, placing himself subtly between Albedo and the villagers, breaking her intimidating line of sight. He gave them another disarming smile. "What she means is, we're here to help. Lord Ains is a busy guy, so he sent us to make sure you're safe. For good this time." He looked at their crude fortifications, at the weary slump of their shoulders. "You've all been through a lot. Why don't you let us help you get back on your feet?" Henry Emmett, though still visibly wary of Albedo, focused on Naruto. There was something in his eyes, a genuine, uncomplicated sincerity, that she chose to trust. "Help us. How?" "For starters," Naruto said, walking over to a section of the palisade wall that was splintered and barely standing. He placed a hand on the rough wood. A soft, green glow, the pure life energy of his sage art, enveloped his hand. The villagers gasped as the splintered wood groaned, twisted, and then healed itself. Fresh, strong fibers knit together, saplings sprouted from the top of the posts and wove themselves into a thick, thorny barrier, and the entire section of the wall became twice as thick and 10 times as strong as it had been. It was not just repaired, it was renewed, infused with life. He turned back, dusting off his hands. "Like that, we can help." The sight of this casual miracle, an act of creation in the face of so much destruction, broke the spell of fear. A murmur of disbelief and wonder spread through the crowd. Albedo watched, her jaw clenched so tightly her teeth ached. A waste, a disgusting, sentimental waste of a god's power. He could have leveled the forest and built a fortress of stone with a single jutsu. Instead, he was gardening. He was performing party tricks for peasants, dirtying his hands to mend their pathetic fence. It was an insult to the very concept of power. Over the next few hours, Naruto became a whirlwind of helpful, impossible energy. He didn't act like a remote god or a conquering lord. He acted like a neighbor. He moved among the villagers, his easy-going charm a soothing balm on their frayed nerves. He lifted a fallen cart that would have taken 10 men to move, setting it back on its wheels as if it were a toy. He used his sage art to purify their well, turning the murky water crystal clear. He even sat with the children, mesmerizing them by creating tiny, harmless recentricons of pure wind that spun like pinwheels in his palm. He was single-handedly healing the village, not just its physical structures but its wounded spirit. He was giving them something they hadn't had in a very long time, hope. Albedo stayed apart, a solitary, menacing figure near the gate, observing. Every smile Naruto shared with a villager, every child's laugh he elicited, was a physical affront to her. This was not the Nazarick way. Dominance was asserted through fear. Loyalty was commanded through overwhelming power. You did not fraternize with lesser lifeforms. You ruled them. Finally, she could stand it no more. She strode over to him as he was helping Henry and a few others ration out their meager food supplies. A word, she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Naruto excused himself and followed her to a quiet spot away from the villagers. What, precisely, do you think you are doing? She hissed, her voice a low, furious whisper. Your mission was to eliminate a threat. It was not to become the village handyman. You are demeaning yourself. You are demeaning Lord Ains by association. Demeaning myself, Naruto replied, his good humor finally fading. I'm helping people, Albedo. It's what I do. It's what power is for. You don't get it, because you've spent your whole life in a gilded tomb taking orders. Out here, power isn't about how many people you can control. It's about how many you can protect. You are teaching them weakness. She shot back. They should be cowering in fear, grateful that we have not decided to exterminate them for their insolence. That fear would ensure their loyalty. T.S. Familiarity you are breeding will only lead to contempt. They will see you as a tool, a servant to be used for their own needs. No, Naruto said, his blue eyes locking onto hers, his gaze so intense it made her falter. You're wrong. Fear is a chain. It's heavy, and it breaks the moment a stronger master comes along. Trust. Trust is a root. It grows deep. It holds on. These people aren't my property. They're my friends. Or they will be. And I'll tell you something you'll never learn from your skeleton king. One friend who will stand with you is worth more than an army of slaves who will stab you in the back the second you turn around. Her mind reeled. The concept was so alien, so contrary to her very nature, it felt like a physical blow. But she couldn't refute it. She had seen the way the villagers looked at him. It was not the look of a slave at their master. It was the look of a follower at their leader. A genuine, unforced loyalty that he had earned in a few hours with simple acts of kindness. Lord Ains has ordered that their loyalty be sworn to Nazarick, she finally managed to say, falling back on her orders as a last line of defense. Not to you. Then Lord Ains show. LD come down here and help them fix their well, Naruto retorted. You can't demand loyalty, Albedo. You have to earn it. He left her standing there, the truth of his words echoing in the silence of her mind. She felt a sudden, dizzying sense of vertigo. The perfect, black and white world of Nazarick was cracking, and she was terrified of the shades of gray pouring in. She pulled out the message scroll, its smooth, magical surface cool against her trembling fingers. She had to report. It was her duty. She activated the spell, and the voice of her master echoed in her mind. Albedo, report on the mission's success. My lord, she began, struggling to keep her voice steady. The threat to the village has been neutralized. Excellent. Casualties. Ains's voice was pleased. None, my lord, not for the enemy, nor the villagers. Quote, the silence on the other end of the connection was long and heavy. Quote. Explain, Ains finally said, his voice stripped of its earlier warmth. She gave him the facts. Her words as clinical and precise as she could make them. She described the non-lethal takedown, Naruto's subsequent interaction with the villagers, the repairing of the wall, the purification of the well. She left out the philosophical argument. She left out her own crushing confusion. So he has made himself their hero, Ains mused, a dangerous edge to his tone. He has ingratiated himself with them. A classic strategy for winning the hearts and minds of a populace. Cunning. Ains was reframing it, twisting Naruto's genuine compassion into a calculated political maneuver because Chi was the only way he could comprehend it. Your orders are updated, Albedo, Ains commanded. Do not interfere with his methods, for now. But you will make it clear to the villagers that he acts as an agent of Nazarick. His kindness is my kindness. His power is my power. Their gratitude, their loyalty, and their lives belong to me. Is that understood? Yes, Lord Ains, she said, her heart a cold, heavy stone in her chest. Perfectly. Quote, the connection ended. She was now tasked with co-opting a miracle, with twisting a genuine act of goodness into a tool of subjugation. She had to stand beside this golden man and paint his light in the colors of Nazarick's darkness. As night fell, the villagers built a large bonfire in the center of the square. They brought out what little food they had to share in a communal meal. a celebration of their survival. Naruto sat among them, cross-legged on the ground, laughing as he listened to a story from the village chief. He looked completely at home, a beacon of warmth and light around which these desperate people had gathered. Albedo watched from the shadows of a nearby building, isolated by her armor, her orders, her very nature. She was an observer, a warden, a thing of darkness on the edge of a circle of light. Enri Emmett's young sister, Nemu, noticed her standing alone. Hesitantly, the little girl broke away from the group and shyly approached the terrifying armored figure. She held out a small, slightly burnt piece of bread, a humble offering. Albedo stared down at the child, then at the bread, her mind a complete blank. No one had offered her anything that wasn't commanded of them. This was a gift, a seed of the trust that Naruto had been talking about. Naruto caught the moment from across the fire. He met Albedo's gaze, and for an instant, his expression was not challenging or mocking. It was encouraging. Go on, his eyes seemed to say. Try it, be a part of something. Her hand, encased in its black gauntlet, trembled as she slowly, uncertainly, reached down to accept the offering. The warmth of the simple, burnt bread against the cold, enchanted metal of her glove was the most profound and unsettling sensation she had ever felt. From his invisible perch high in the night sky, Inquisitor Kalis recorded the event with a silver lens. He had seen the subject display the power to shatter mountains and the restraint to spare insects. Now he was watching him teach a primordial demon the concept of community. The threat assessment was becoming infinitely more complex. This being didn't conquer territory. He conquered souls, one small act of kindness at a time. And that was a type of invasion for which the Argent Council had absolutely no defense. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Heresy of a Smile. The morning broke gray and damp over Carne Village. But for the first time in weeks, the mood was not one of despair. The scent of wood smoke was from cook fires, not funeral pyres. The sounds were of hammers repairing homes, not the weeping of the bereaved. Naruto's presence had been a catalyst, his single night of impossible aid injecting a potent dose of hope directly into the village's flagging heart. He moved among them like he belonged there, his laughter echoing as he helped a farmer lift a fallen beam, his hands glowing with green energy as he encouraged a withered vegetable patch back to vibrant life. He was a miracle in an orange jumpsuit, and the villagers responded to him with a shy, growing reverence that was quickly eclipsing their memory of the skeletal magic caster, Ainzul gown. Albedo watched it all from the doorway of the chief's hut, where they had been given lodging. She had not slept. She had stood through the night, a silent sentinel, replaying the events, the words, the sensations. The warmth of the child's bread. The fury of Naruto's argument. The cold, possessive command of her master. She felt like a compass spun between three powerful, competing magnets. The small piece of burnt bread was tucked away in a dimensional pouch, a secret, treasured artifact of her confusion. To discard it would feel like a sacrilege. To keep it felt like a betrayal. When Naruto finally came back to the hut, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, he found her standing exactly where he'd left her, a statue of polished dread. "You know, you're allowed to help," he said, his tone light. "Or at least sit down. You'll scare the chickens." "I am not here to fraternize with livestock," she replied, her voice clipped. She had her orders. She had to address the issue. "We need to speak about your methods." "I'm all ears," he said, grabbing a cup of water from a pail. "Lord Ains has been informed of your success," she began, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "He is pleased. He has also instructed me to make it clear to these people that your actions are a direct extension of his will. The kindness you show is his kindness. The power you wield is on his authority. Their lives, which you have so graciously spared, belong to the great tomb of Nazarick." She recited the words perfectly, a loyal herald delivering her king's decree. Naruto drank the water, then set the cup down with a soft click. He didn't look angry. He just looked disappointed. "So that's the play," he said, his voice quiet. "He can't stand that I did something good without his name attached. So he's just going to slap his brand on it. Take credit for a kindness he didn't perform." He looked her straight in the eye. "Tell me, Albedo, did he order you to say that, or do you actually believe it?" The question was a scalpel. and it slid right between the plates of her armor and into her heart. Her programming, her very reason for being, screamed at her to say yes. Yes, I believe it. All that is good flows from the supreme beings. But the memory of his hand healing the wall, his smile with the children, her own conflicted awe, they choked the lie in her throat. My beliefs are irrelevant, she deflected. Her gaze unwavering but her spirit in turmoil. I follow the orders of my creator. That's a shame, Naruto said, shaking his head slowly. Because for a minute there, when you were watching those kids by the fire last night, I thought I saw your beliefs. I thought I saw you. He took a step closer. You're not just a puppet, Albedo. I've seen you fight. I've felt your power. There's a fire in you that has nothing to do with Ains. The question is, are you ever going to let it be yours? Before she could process the deeply personal, deeply heretical question, the world changed. A pressure descended on the village. It was a heavy, suffocating presence, thick with sanctimony and righteous fury. The cheerful sounds of rebuilding died, replaced by a sudden, fearful silence. The very air seemed to grow thin, and a brilliant, blinding white light began to shine from the sky above the village square. Naruto was beside Albedo in an instant, his body shielding hers as they moved to the doorway. His easygoing demeanor was gone, replaced by the honed, lethal focus of a warrior. Descending from the clouds on pillars of pure white light were a dozen figures. They wore immaculate white and gold armor, intricately engraved with symbols of suns and swords. They radiated an aura of holy power so intense it was physically painful to look at them. It was a power that felt fundamentally hostile to Albedo's demonic nature, making her skin crawl and her fangs ache. Leading them was a man with a severe, handsome face and hair the color of spun gold. He carried no weapon, but his hands glowed with a light that seemed to burn away the very shadows around him. This was not a squad of grunts. This was the elite. The Black Scripture, Albedo breathed, her voice a low growl of recognition. She had studied the powers of this world in Nazarik's library. These were the strongest of the human nations, the personal guard of the gods of the slain theocracy. The captain, Rufus, landed softly in the center of the village, his golden eyes sweeping over the terrified villagers before landing on Naruto and Albedo. A look of profound disgust twisted his handsome features. Behold, the festering heart of the heresy, he declared, his voice ringing with the clarity of a bell and the conviction of a zealot. He pointed a glowing finger at them. A demon of the deepest pits, consorting openly with one of our own kind. You have defiled this land with your presence. You have violated the sacred law of the six gods, which states that humanity alone is divine. Surrender the human for purification, demon, and we will grant you a swift end. Naruto stepped out into the square, placing himself between the holy knights and the cowering villagers. Albedo moved to stand with him, her hand gripping the hilt of her axe. The enemy's holy aura was a physical irritant, but the unspoken challenge to her right to stand beside Naruto was a far greater insult. You've got it all wrong, pal, Naruto said, his voice calm. I'm not with her, she's with me, and you're not welcome in our village. The use of the word our sent a strange, powerful jolt through Albedo. Rufus laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Your village. You are a traitor to your race. A blasphemer who shares air with filth. You have forfeited your divinity. You are nothing. He raised his hand. Cleanse this place. Leave no stone unturned. No heretic breathing. The Black Scripture Knights raised their lances, which began to glow with searing holy light. Stay behind me, Albedo said to Naruto, stepping in front of him. Her massive wings flared, a shield of midnight black. Their holy magic is a poison to my kind, but I am the overseer of the floor guardians. My defenses are absolute. I will handle this. It was not an act of following orders. It was a personal, possessive declaration. This is my partner. This is my village. You will not touch them. Go for it, Naruto said simply, stepping back. He crossed his arms, becoming an observer. He wanted to see what she could do. He wanted to see her fight for something other than a distant king. Rufus sneered. A demon dares to challenge the light of the gods. So be it. Holy smite. He and his knights unleashed a volley of brilliant white lances of pure holy energy. They screamed through the air, converging on Albedo's position. The attack was powerful enough to vaporize a small army. Albedo didn't even flinch. She slammed the butt of her axe, Ginungagap, into the ground. A dome of shimmering, translucent darkness erupted around her, a skill L from her unique build as a specialized tank. The holy lances slammed into the barrier and shattered like glass, their divine energy fizzling out into harmless sparks. Is that the best your gods can offer? She taunted, her voice dripping with contempt. Pathetic. With a roar, she launched herself forward. She was not a lumbering knight. She was a blur of black armor, moving with a speed that defied her size. She crashed into the black scriptures line like a meteor. Her axe was a whirlwind of destruction. She was not using precision. She was using overwhelming, brutal force. A knight's holy shield was shattered by a single blow, the man sent flying. Another spear was parried with the flat of her axe before her gauntleted fist caved in his helmet. It was a masterful display of power. She was a single, indomitable force of destruction, holding her own against the elite of the theocracy. But they were prepared. Rufus began a chant, his hands weaving complex signs. Pillar of celestial wrath, he roared. A colossal column of searing white fire erupted from the heavens, aimed not at Albedo, but at the center of the village, where the villagers were huddled in terror. It was a cruel, calculated move. Force her to defend, to abandon her attack. Albedo's eyes widened. She was too far away, locked in combat. She couldn't get back in time. But she didn't have to. Naruto appeared in the path of the pillar of light. He just was there. He raised a single hand. The column of holy fire, a spell that could level a fortress, crashed against his open palm. And stopped. It didn't explode. It didn't push him back. The torrent of divine energy simply flowed into his hand, swirling for a moment before being completely and utterly absorbed, leaving behind nothing but a profound silence. The members of the Black Scripture, Rufus included, froze mid-combat. Their faces, which had been masks of righteous fury, were now slack with pure, uncomprehending shock. Their ultimate attack, a direct gift from their gods, had been eaten. My turn, Naruto said, his voice dangerously quiet. He opened his hand. The holy energy he had absorbed swirled there, no longer white and pure, but tainted, corrupted with a black, sickly energy. It was his truth-seeking orb technique, capable of negating any form of ninjutsu. It seemed it worked on divine magic, too. You get your power from your gods, right? Naruto asked, his voice echoing in the silent square. You borrow it. It's not really yours. He clenched his fist, and the corrupted ball of holy energy imploded, vanishing with a sickening crunch. Let me show you what real power looks like. He entered Six Paths Sage mode. The golden fire erupted around him, a torrent of pure, positive life energy so potent that the grass at his feet began to grow into lush green turf. The divine aura of the Black Scripture flickered and dimmed in his presence, their borrowed light utterly eclipsed by the sun that had just risen in their midst. He is not human, Rufus whispered, his fanaticism finally cracking, replaced by a primal, holy terror. He is a false god. Anathema. Naruto didn't attack them. He looked past them, at Albedo, who was still locked in combat. Her armor slightly scorched but her eyes blazing with fury. He gave her a slight nod. Finish it. It was a gesture of trust. A gift. He was giving the victory to her. With a cry that was part battle roar and part cathartic release, Albedo renewed her assault with a ferocity that was terrifying to behold. The Black Scripture, their morale shattered by Naruto's display, broke. Albedo moved among them, her axe not a tool of death, but of judgment. She broke their limbs, shattered their armor, and dismantled their pride with brutal, overwhelming efficiency. In moments, it was over. The elite knights of the slain theocracy lay broken and defeated at her feet. Only Rufus remained, on his knees, staring at Naruto with eyes full of terror and shattered faith. Albedo strode over to him, the tip of her massive axe coming to rest at his throat. You defiled this land, she hissed, her voice a low promise of death. You threatened what is mine. Beg for your life. Rufus looked from her to Naruto. Kill me, he spat. I will not suffer the indignity of being spared by a heretic and his demonic whore. Albedo's eyes blazed. Her axe lifted. Albedo, stop. Naruto's voice was calm, but it cut through her rage like a razor. She froze, her axe held high, trembling with the desire to strike. He's not worth it. Naruto said, walking over. He looked down at the defeated captain. You live. You go back to your gods and you tell them that Karne village is under my protection. And if they want it, they can come and talk to me themselves. Now get out of my sight. He turned his back on them, an act of supreme, dismissive confidence. Albedo, after a long, agonizing moment, lowered her axe. She kicked Rufus in the ribs, a final act of contempt, before turning to join Naruto. The defeated knights gathered their captain and, without a word, vanished into the sky on pillars of fading light. The village was silent for a beat, and then it erupted in a cheer so loud it shook the very trees. They were not cheering for a distant, skeletal lord. They were cheering for the golden god who ate holy fire, and for the avenging dark angel who fought for them. Naruto turned to Albedo amidst the celebration. There were a few scorch marks on her armor, a thin trickle of black blood from a cut on her cheek. He reached up, his ungloved thumb gently wiping the blood away. The touch was electric. Albedo froze, her breath catching in her throat. His thumb was warm against her cold skin. It was an act of simple, profound intimacy. You were amazing, he said, his voice sincere. His blue eyes full of genuine admiration. You didn't need my help at all. She had fought for Nazarik's property. She had fought to follow orders. But in the end, she had fought to protect him, and he, in turn, had trusted her, respected her, and now, he was touching her with a gentleness that was more powerful than any spell. Ains's orders, her programming, her entire structured reality, it all seemed to fade into the background, becoming a distant, irrelevant noise. All that mattered was the warmth of his thumb on her cheek and the sincerity in his eyes. The heresy of.F.A. smile had been followed by the blasphemy of a touch, and Albedo, for the first time in her life, did not feel like a creation. She felt like a person. And she was terrified. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The echo of a choice. The cheers of the villagers washed over Albedo in waves, a chaotic, alien sound. In Nazarik, adulation was a structured affair. Kneeling, formal praise, the reverent silence of lesser beings in the presence of the divine. This was different. This was a messy, joyous, unrestrained outpouring of genuine gratitude. They were celebrating her, not as an extension of Ain's Gaon, not as the overseer of the floor guardians, but as Albedo, the dark angel who had stood between them and annihilation. The feeling it ignited within her was a terrifying, addictive warmth that spread through her veins like a sweet poison. Her gaze was fixed on Naruto. He was accepting the praise with an easy grace, ruffling a child's hair, clapping a farmer on the shoulder. He was not claiming the victory for himself. He was deflecting it, gesturing towards her, telling the villagers in no uncertain terms that she had been the one to drive back the holy knights. He was sharing his light with her, and she felt herself, for the first time, not wanting to retreat into the comfort of Nazarik's shadows. Henry Emmett, her face smudged with dirt but shining with a fierce, newfound confidence, pushed through the crowd. She stopped before them both, and bowed deeply from the waist. On behalf of Karne village, she said, her voice clear and strong, thank you. Naruto-sama, Albedo-sama, we owe you our lives. The honorifics were directed at them equally. The debt was owed to them personally. There was no mention of a distant, skeletal king. This was the moment Albedo had been ordered to correct. She was supposed to step forward and declare this victory, this life, the sole property of Ain's Gaon. The words formed in her mind, a cold, familiar script. But she looked at Naruto's trusting, expectant face. She looked at Henry's honest, grateful eyes. The scripted words felt like a lie. A theft. You are welcome, Albedo said, the words feeling foreign and clumsy on her tongue. She was not the speech she was supposed to make, but it was the only one she could manage. It was an omission that was, in itself, an act of rebellion. Naruto's smile widened, a silent acknowledgement of her choice. He knew what she had been ordered to do, and he knew that she had just, in her own small way, refused. Later that evening, as a fragile peace settled over the weary but jubilant village, Albedo found a secluded spot at the edge of the woods. The message scroll felt heavier than her axe. This was the report she dreaded, the one that could not be sanitized with clinical facts. She had deviated from the mission's spirit. If not its letter, she had fought with personal fury, and she had stood by as Naruto spared a valuable enemy intelligence asset. She activated the scroll. The mental connection was instantaneous. Albedo. Ains's voice was a cold, flat line in her mind. Lord Ains, she began, her voice a perfect mask of formality. The secondary threat has been neutralized. He Black Scripture of the slain theocracy launched a full-scale assault on the village. The Black Scripture. Ains's mental voice sharpened with alarm and a hint of avarice. Their legendary items. Their strength. Report their numbers and capabilities at once. A dozen knights, led by a captain, Albedo recited. Their power was rooted in high-tier holy magic. They were formidable. You have eliminated them, then. Excellent. Their equipment is to be gathered and returned to the treasury at once. A fine prize. Albedo's heart hammered against her ribs. Here was the lie, the point of no return. There is no equipment to be gathered, my lord. The enemy was defeated, but not destroyed. They have been allowed to retreat. The silence that followed was the most terrifying thing she had ever experienced. It was not empty. It was a vacuum filled with a cold, calculating rage, a pressure that seemed to physically press down on her. Explain, Ains commanded. The single word was lace. With the killing frost of the tomb's deepest levels. Naruto Uzumaki intervened, she said, choosing her words with the care of someone walking through a minefield. His power rendered their holy magic inert. He deemed them unworthy of death. He sent them back with a message of warning, claiming the village as his own territory. She phrased it to sound like a strategic power play, an act of arrogant dominance, not of mercy. It was the only language she knew her master would understand. He did what? Ains's voice was dangerously quiet. He took the strongest knights of a hostile nation, beings who now possess first-hand knowledge of his godlike power, and he let them go. Does he have any concept of strategy? Of information security? That is not a power play, Albedo. That is the act of a sentimental fool. His power is such that he does not perceive them as a threat, my lord, she offered, a weak defense. His perception is irrelevant. A viper is still a viper, even if you are a dragon. This experiment is over, Ains declared, his voice hard as iron. Your mission is terminated. Bring the asset back to Nazarick. Immediately. I will not have this unpredictable variable roaming free, making strategic blunders that could endanger us all. Is that understood? Yes, Lord Ains, she whispered, her spirit plummeting. The cage door was swinging shut. The connection severed, leaving her alone in the chilling silence. She felt a profound, aching sense of loss. She looked back at the village, at the warm, flickering lights of the homes, the distant sound of a mother singing a lullaby. She was being recalled to the perfect, silent darkness of the tomb, and for the first time, it did not feel like coming home. It felt like a sentence. She found Naruto sitting on the repaired palisade wall, looking up at the stars. The sky here was different from the enchanted ceiling of Nazarick's 9th floor. It was real, chaotic, and beautiful. He wants us to go back, doesn't he? Naruto said without looking at her. His senses were so sharp, he had probably felt the shift in her mood from half a village away. He is displeased, Albedo admitted, coming to stand near the wall. He believes your mercy was a tactical error. He thinks like a gamer, Naruto said with a sigh, always thinking about threat levels, loot drops, and information control. He's forgotten that we're dealing with people. He turned to look at her, his blue eyes soft in the starlight. But I don't care what he thinks. I care what you think. You were there. You fought them. What did it feel like? The question was not about strategy. It was about her. She remembered the rage, the satisfying crunch of her axe against a holy shield, the fierce, possessive feeling of protecting the village, of protecting him. I am a warrior of Nazarick, she said, her voice low. It is my function to destroy the enemies of my lord. That's not what I asked, he pressed gently. I didn't ask about your function. I asked how it felt. When you stood in front of me, when you took on a dozen holy knights by yourself, what was that, Albedo? Was that just an order you were following? She stared at him, her mind a whirlwind. She remembered the fear of their holy magic, a fear that had been utterly eclipsed by her fury at their arrogance, their threat to him. She remembered the pride she felt when he nodded to her, trusting her to finish the fight. It wasn't the cold satisfaction of a completed task. It was a hot, vibrant, and fiercely personal joy. It was, she struggled for the word, for the truth. It was not unpleasant. The admission, small as it was a seismic event. It was the first time she had ever defined an action by her own feeling, rather than by its service to Nazarick. Naruto smiled, a soft, knowing expression. Yeah, it's a good feeling, isn't it? To fight for something you choose to protect. He looked out at the sleeping village. I could get used to this. Helping these people, building something instead of just protecting a relic of the past. He then looked back at her, and his expression was serious, his gaze holding hers. Ains ordered you to bring me back. That's your order, but I'm giving you a choice. I'm not going back to that tomb. Not to be a prisoner, not to be a weapon they keep locked in a box. I'm staying here. I'm going to help these people build a life, a real one. And I'm going to protect them from anyone who tries to stop it, whether it's your old friends from the theocracy, or your boss. He hopped down from the wall, standing before her. He was not giving her an order. He was offering her a possibility, a future she had never conceived of. So that's my choice, Albedo, he said, his voice quiet but firm. Now you have to make yours. Are you going back to your cage? Or are you going to stay here and help me build something real? In a realm that was neither night nor day, Inquisitor Kalis knelt before the silver throne of Lyrasil. The celestial chamber was silent as he delivered his report, his voice a dispassionate monotone that described impossible events. The subject then absorbed a high-tier divine class offensive spell, Pillar of Celestial Wrath. With his bare hand, Kalis recited. He then demonstrated the ability to corrupt its holy energy before nullifying it entirely. He then ceded the final victory to his demonic companion, who proceeded to neutralize the remaining theocracy forces. Lyrasil listened, his fingers steepled, his moon-white brow furrowed in thought. He wields a power that negates divinity itself. He shows mercy to his enemies. And he inspires personal loyalty in a being of absolute, programmed fealty. This is not a conqueror, Kalis. It is a paradigm shifter. An ideological plague. His threat level remains incalculable. Kalis stated. His threat is not in what he can destroy, Lyrasil corrected. It is in what he can create. Loyalty not born of fear. Power not used for conquest. He is introducing concepts to this world that could unravel the very fabric of the celestial order we have maintained for millennia. He stood, his starlight robes pooling around him. Observation was no longer sufficient. A direct approach was needed, but not one of force. Kalis, your mission is complete. Send for Alara. It is time we fought this fire not with water, but with a sweeter flame. If is Naruto Uzumaki responds to kindness and loyalty, then we shall offer him a kindness that is divine, and a loyalty that is absolute. It is time we learned if this new god can be persuaded. Back in Carne, the world had shrunk to the space between Naruto and Albedo. A king's command versus a hero's question. A life of perfect, ordered servitude versus a future of chaotic, terrifying freedom. Everything she was, everything she had been created to be, screamed at her to obey, to drag him back to Nazarick, to restore the order that he had so completely shattered. But she looked into his eyes. And she did not see a variable to be controlled or an asset to be managed. She saw a man who had looked at a weapon and seen a person. She remembered the warmth of his hand, the pride in his voice when he praised her, the simple, revolutionary trust he had placed in her. She looked at the sleeping village, this tiny, insignificant collection of mortal lives that she had, against all logic, fought for. Protected. That feeling of fierce, personal pride was still echoing in her soul. It was the most real thing she had ever felt. Her choice was not a choice. It was a surrender of who she was supposed to be. For a chance to discover who she was. She slowly, deliberately, reached for the message scroll that was still clutched in her hand. Her fingers, encased in black metal, closed around the delicate parchment. And with a sharp, definitive crack, she snapped it in two. The severed connection to her master, to her home, to her entire existence, was a thunderclap in the silent night. Chapter 9 End.